Let's see. We do have some people waiting. Oh, John Jr. Let's see. Hold on. I gotta pull everything up. I'll start at 10:02. Nope, we are right and ready to go at 10. How's it going, guys? Good morning. Good morning. So it should start working here in a second now. Let me pull it up, the commands. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Hopefully pretty good. Ready to, check out some WPF drafts and all that good stuff. Thank you, guys. 10:01. No way. No show. Actually, it's 7. And the time zone goes via what I'm in. How's it going, Dashing? Welcome, welcome. How's it going, everybody? Good morning, good morning. See, we got people flooding in. We'll give it a couple minutes just to give people a chance to, flood in and join the stream and check it out before we jump into it. And we can go over some ground rules and things like that. Pull up WPF docs so I can know exactly what ground rules I want to go over. We will see.
Welcome, people.
Exactly.
Up bright and early.
I'm always up early. It's one of my days off, and I decided to wake up 7 a.m. to do Pokemon stream. So, all for you guys. All for you guys.
Hey, for me, Owen had to convince me, because I usually go to work at like 11:30.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm usually asleep at this point.
Morning, Terry. How's it going, bro? Oh, yeah. Usually, during the school year, it's way worse with classes, but I usually wake up. I have 4 days a week where I'm up at 5 a.m. And the other days I do like to sleep, but I usually don't like to wake up past like 8 or 9. I usually like sleep until like 8 or 9 the other days. So this is we're waking up a little bit earlier on one of my sleeping days. Again, all for you guys, But I think it's about time. I think we can kind of start looking at things, checking some things out as people start flooding in. Of course, as you flood in, be sure to drop a like. We got 19 concurrent viewers, but we don't have 23, and we don't have 23 likes, and that's crazy. You're representing the Mid Pokemaster fan club at population U. But we can go ahead and start checking some stuff out. Oh, look, there, Nightbot woke up. It finally did the commands that you put in like an hour ago. Repping the agency,
Perfect.
Of course. I had to look cool in front of my friends in stream. To show them that I had agency merch, right? Okay, so today, obviously, as you can see, we're going to be doing the WPF live stream. I'm joined by my buddy CP Marcus. You can say hi.
How's it going, guys? Excited to be here.
Exactly. So we're going to be doing, obviously, our WPF live stream. We're going over their first season of their Wi-Fi Divisions drafts. There's some really cool squads this season. We got Homecoming. It's going to be a good time. Now, as for Terra rules and things like that, this league, it's about as simple as you'd see from a Wi-Fi league. Typically, you could only Terra on Tuesdays and 3 types, and most of these Wi-Fi leagues that have been out. But for this, it's 1 Terra captain. A lot of Pokemon are Terra banned. So, for instance, a Pokemon like, let's take a look. A Pokemon like Urshifu Single Strike isn't allowed to Terra. A Pokemon like Dragapult, Qianpao, they aren't allowed to Terra because they're seen as a little bit overwhelming. But other than that, you should be good to go. Give it a second, people will come, hopefully. Alright, we'll wait a little bit longer as we're explaining the rules and stuff like that. Hello. So, other than that, pretty simple stuff. I believe it was it a 120-point budget this season?
I think it was 115.
115. So, coaches had 115 points to get some, pocket of 9 to 11 Pokemon. How they decided to do so, will be seen. So, yeah, with that being said, I believe, you are sparse. Okay, I was going to say, I couldn't remember if I did sparse or done sparse for you, Will, but I'm pretty sure it was sparse. But, yeah, we'll give it a call. We got a big at everyone. Oh no, I thought we pinged everyone. Delta Interest and Delta Coach. There we go. Ugh. After this, too, all of our coaches' draft analysis are going to be going live. Like I said, if there's ! Team name to, check out your favorite coach. So, for example, if you want to watch John Jr.'s videos for some reason, you get ! Nightshaders, you can check out his link. Or if you want to check out my co-host Marcus, you get ! Roselius. It'll take you to a link to their channel in the chat. And you can always check out the description below. I have everybody linked in the description for people watching after the fact and things like that. So, everybody go check out. I thought it was 110. Do you have more points left over, Bruno?
Is it 110?
I don't know. It might be. I don't know if Bruno has leftover points. It might not be. No,
I'm not going to lie. It felt like 115.
It might be 110. No, it's 110. If Bruno thought it was 110 and Bruno has 0 points left over, I'm going to say it was 110. But,
oh,
again,
shit, it was 110.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and check everybody out in the description, obviously. ! As well, obviously works. And, yeah, we're going to be going through each of the rounds and each of the teams. We're going to try and keep it at a breakneck blitz pace and get through these picks quick. Probably 30 to 45 seconds for each pick. Maybe a minute for a really cool pick or something like that. But how can you be mid and a master at the same time? Everybody's been asking him that. It is 110. See, we know what we're doing. We're ready to go. But yeah, there's some really interesting teams here with some really interesting. I think there's some really interesting Terra caps in general. Actually, there's some really cool ones. So, with that being said, though, disliking the stream because John Jr. is here. It's a price we have to pay when we let John show up. No, that's fair. Oh, there's 2 dislikes.
Uh-oh.
Oh, man. Alrighty, with that being said, though, I think we should be good to go. Do we have the okay to start, Mr. Thomas? We give it a couple minutes for the ping. I'm sure people would slowly start to flood in and things like that, too, as we go throughout. I think we got the okay. Alright. With that being said, we can go ahead and jump into the first pick of the draft. So many cool options that we can go with. You can be boring and you can go Dragapult. You can get something broken like Chien-Pao, Iron Valiant. So many. I feel like this gen, it's incredibly top heavy and there's a lot of crazy stuff. So those first 5 picks can really go in almost any order you decide to go in. So lots of really cool options. But we're going to see first pick, which is J. Ricky going with Urshifu Single Strike. Now, it saw a little bit of a nerf, right? At first we thought like, oh man, they kind of chilled down Urshifu a little bit. They dropped down Wicked Blow to, I believe, 75 base power, making it a little bit weaker than, the guaranteed crit close combat dark move that it was before. But then they decided to give my boy Swords Dance. And that in conjunction with either like Life Orb variants, Resist Berry, Focus Sash. We've seen a ton of Focus Sash SD Urshifus, or Punching Glove, which is a ridiculously good item on this Pokemon. Make this thing an absolute menace. This cannot Terra, so this will not be J. Ricky's Terra Captain, or it would be absolutely insane, but it's still great nonetheless. And I think that's something that people are really kind of sleeping on with Shifu is... yeah, it got SD, and it's going to be a really cool variant, but people forget that Scarf and Band is still going to 2-hit KO everything. There's very few calcs that 75 base power nerf really matters for, and this Pokemon is so good at getting in other scary offense to beat down the 3.5 fairies that are in this metagame. And that's another thing to mention as well, that there's not really a lot of fairy types in the Paldeadex metagame, so there's not really a lot that switches into the dual stab of Dark and Fighting, and there's a lot of great pairings with Urshifu, so this was definitely a really good pickup for J. Ricky. This Pokemon I really want to try in the YSI scene. I had it in a Showdown League and absolutely loved it in Gen 9, so I'm sure it'll pop off for J. Ricky. Alright, next up, we can go ahead, jump into our next pick, which is going to be Thomas.
We got Thomas with Iron Valiant, one of the crazy, and basically one of the only fairies in the draft. So again, when you have Urshifu right off the bat, it's Wicked Blow. You're not going to be really wanting to take it with Iron Valiant, but this one is absolutely insane as a round 1 pick. It can run so many sets. Its variability and versatility is really what makes it an absolute staple as a top 3, top 4 pick in the draft scene. Being able to run Booster Energy just makes it that much more versatile, boosting its speed, special attack or attack. You got SD, you got Calm Mind, and you have a ton of coverage on both sides. It is lacking a little bit of that Fairy Stab, but honestly, with Moonblast on the special side, that's kind of all you need. It, again, isn't going to be the Terra Captain, if I'm not mistaken, because that was Terra Band. But boy, this mon is absolutely cracked in every way possible. It's just going to carve out teams.
For sure. Next up, I have my co-host here, and Brody did him dirty and put the little Palafin on the slide, but trust me, he is much scarier in this. We have Palafin here for Marcus. A Pokemon that is just... it feels impossible to build for sometimes, where you think you have a check, and then you calc and you see your water resist dies to close combat from this thing. Even if it's neutral, you're going to have a bad time against it, whether it be choice band variants. I've seen Scarf do well. I've seen Assault Vest do phenomenally. And then you have your tried and true taunt bulk up sets that just absolutely massacres fat and balanced teams. There's not a lot you can do in the face of a Palafin. It's really only offensively checking it, and if Marcus can grab solid, Volt Turn partners and solid hazards alongside this Pokemon's going to absolutely cleave through teams. Very, very scary stuff. And again, once he gets into his big form, you're in a good spot. Now, it is a little bit obnoxious to try and position that, but it's not too hard in all honesty, especially with access to Flip Turn being one of 2 Pokemon in the game that can use the water type U-turn. Get out of there, get back in, and then start clicking some buttons. So Palafin definitely a big pickup here. Also Terra Band. A lot of these top mons are going to be Terra Band. We won't be saying that all stream, I promise, but this Pokemon can't Terra because have fun switching to your Terra Water Wave Crash and whatever that might be, but that's going to be Palafin here. Next up, we have Obo.
We got Polt. Polt is an absolute classic. You guys have obviously been seeing it go round 1, pick 1 in Gen 8, but it really hasn't lost anything. It did lose access to Steel Wing for some of those fairies, but considering that they basically Steel Winged half the fairies out of Paldea, it doesn't really matter. You basically got Darts, you got Phantom Force, you got Willow, you got a lot of the special sides. I mean, Specs is going to be the main set that people have to deal with, but Insane Mon, great speed, and speed's definitely going to be a luxury of the draft, as well as like the fairies, as Zoan said, as well as the darks, and as well as the steals. And basically, when Polt can really cleave through a lot of teams without those types and without the speed on the opponent's side, it's going to be a wild mom to prep for.
100%. Next up, we have Chien Pao. What I personally, I don't know, maybe I'm biased because I've used it, and every time I've built for it, it's been completely obnoxious. I think this Pokemon is brain dead broken. And me getting it at pick 5 is obviously really, really nice. John just recently used it in the BBR and brought it to the championship game. And it went crazy there. Now, obviously, you could Terra there. It's not a lot of Terra here, but it still has no switches. It's Sword of Ruin lowering everything's defense. Nothing really switches into the combination of Crunch, Icicle Crash / Spinner, and Sacred Sword. You don't have great coverage, but you have the coverage you need to really pop off and just poke a hole through every possible team. This, in conjunction with Hazards and Double Priority and Sucker Punch and Ice Shard, make this Pokemon also very, very anti-cheese. And I think Priority is a really, really solid luxury in Paldea decks with all of the Terra shenanigans that go on, all the setuping and, you know, changing your typing. Having 2 strong stab types of Priority that are typically not resisted together make this Pokemon very, very difficult to, you know, it makes it very difficult for your opponent to try and set up and cheese and beat you in that way, too. And I think that's a very valuable aspect of this Pokemon, whether it be Choice Band variants, Swords Dance variants, Heavy Duty Boots just 4 attacks, Life Orb, I've seen Clear Amulet, I've seen a ton of different things. This Pokemon is insane, and it's the best thumbnail mon of all time, obviously. If you look at John's channel, I think we did a count, and I have to let everybody know on stream this. I think John had 28 videos or something like that for BBR last season, including team builders and things like that. And I think Chien Pao was on 18 of them. So it works. Mid got his thumbnail mon, and it's obviously a really good Pokemon as well. So Chien Pao is definitely a great pickup for him here.
Iron Bundle, 80% of the time, it's going to be winning this game. You got, I mean, here's the thing. I've played some people and they've missed 3 of their Hydro Pumps and that mon does nothing. But this guy is absolutely crazy when it lands. Freeze Dry is obviously just one of those moves that will get guaranteed damage versus everything. And access to Flip Turn, as well as, you know, Palafin being those only 2 mons, is really, really special. This Iron Bundle can just cleave through teams as long as it lands. Again, the Hydro Pump. I think this is Terra Band as well, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I think it's actually Terra Loud. That's why we ended up picking it up for him pretty early.
Well.
Which makes it immensely better.
There goes my prep for it.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Oh, no. Yes, this mon, again, is going to be crazy. With access to Omni Terra, it is going to be wild. It can even go Terra Water just to guarantee that it lands those water moves. But just being able to turn into a resisted type, being able to turn into ice, or being able to turn into the water, that's kind of all that T-Row is going to have to do. But frankly, it is a very straightforward mon. Gets damage, outspeeds everything, nothing more you need to know.
Exactly. Doesn't get a lot of coverage, gets the coverage it needs. Next up, we have Zamazenta Crown. And I personally think that this was the biggest crime in the draft and in the tier list. Like, the fact that it wasn't max points. Because, again, it got, like, nerfed, in a sense. I know its stats got nerfed a little bit. I don't remember exactly where, but I know that they got pretty considerably nerfed. And I know that Dauntless Shield was nerfed, where it only activates the first time you come in. And that's all well and good, and I think if the next thing that happened didn't happen, this Pokemon would be super allowable on Wi-Fi, and, you know, just a solid top-end pick. But I think this Pokemon getting access to Body Press makes it so overbearing and overwhelming in the builder and in the game itself. Unless you have a Ghost, there's really not much that switches into Zamazenta. Once it sets up that Iron Defense, gets up to +3 and clicks Body Press, your resists are taking 70%. And it's not like this Pokemon is really bulky physically and has no speed. No, it's really bulky. It's not like this Pokemon is really bulky and has no speed. No, it's chilling at 128. And it's not like this Pokemon doesn't have a solid attack stat with Close Combat and Behemoth Bash. It's Black. Yeah, it's Bash. Okay, Blade's the other one. And a ton of different coverage and Elemental Fangs and things like that. I personally think this Pokemon is insane. And I don't know, I've always been on the ban Zama train, even last gen when a lot of leagues were testing it in. And Personally, I'm still on it. So unless John really fumbles the bag this season, I think he's going to have a good time with Zamazenta. It can't Terra. Thankfully, they at least banned Terra on it because I think that would have made it super broken. But definitely a really solid pickup for John here so late in the round. Pick number, 7? Getting Zamazenta, which is pretty crazy, to say the least.
Yeah, especially at 17 points, that mon is going to be a steal, and it is going to be breaking drafts with Iron Defense. With this team, Q, I really like Enamorous. This mon can really do it all in terms of the special coverage, having access to Earth Power, Mystical Fire, Sludge Bomb, and of course Moonblast. You got Contrary for some physical shenanigans, and if you really want to, you can do the Calm Mind Eject Pack strat. Be that guy. Do not recommend it. But it is very fun. Again, in such a hyper-offensive meta, you're just going to be breaking through teams with a mon like this. Very solid speed for the attack that it can produce. It's a very consistent Pokemon. The one drawback, the one hindrance, is no access to U-turn, which is a little bit unfortunate. But frankly, once it comes in, you really don't want to leave because you're just going to be doing consistent damage the whole time. And again, basically just having an offensive fairy is really nice. Just having that good fairy that you're always going to be bringing is also nice. It's just a passive check to some of these Dark and Dragon types. Even if it's not the most offensive, I mean, it's kind of like Valiant, where it's like you don't really want to have that as your defensive fairy, but just the fact that it's a consistent fairy that you can bring always is going to be so helpful as well. Same with flying.
And it's a great Terra Captain as well, which it was his Terra Captain. And this Pokemon with its really, really solid coverage and picking up maybe just a random electric coverage or a random ground coverage can be really clutch for him as well. Next up, man, another Pokemon that fell so far. I think this Pokemon is not Terra banned. That's Tornadus Therian. And Draft League player love clicking U-turn and having Regenerator. I think this Pokemon is still debatably a top 5 Pokemon, especially with the Terra rules we have right now. This thing is still incredible. Now, it did lose access to Knockoff, which is a big boon to, like, defensive, just normal Taunt Torns. But I think having access to Terra and being able to Terra all really ups Torn's offensive viability. I think it makes it so much better with nasty plot variants. I'm using this in OLT right now, and I have brought in a different Terra type every single week out of 6. Every single week. It is very, very versatile in that regard. With regen, it's high bulk and high speed. Changing into a Terra type, it gives you a catch-all check to one thing, guaranteed, every single game, which is incredible. It has the best ability in the game, and it has great coverage, and Terra Blast just gives it perfect coverage, no matter what you want. If you want ground coverage that week, or water coverage, or whatever it might be, you got it. It got access to Bleak Wind Storm this gen, which is a pretty cool signature move. I know a lot of people aren't big on it because they're like, it still can miss, and it's only a little bit more accurate than Hurricane. I think it's nice in some instances because getting that speed drop can obviously be nice, and having more of an opportunity hit than the unreliable Hurricane is nice. 80 is better than 70. And depending on calcs and things like that, a lot of times you don't really need the Hurricane, so you just kind of have to be able to make that decision on your own and builder and things like that. But I'm never going to be upset with a Torn pick. I think this is debatably a top 5 Pokemon that fell to the second half of round 1, and that's obviously great for Bruno. So, very solid.
Completely agreed. I'm actually in GBA and I drafted them on round 1. That is going to be crazy, especially as a tier 2.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what they do with the tiers. Anyways, we got JV with Great Tusk. This mon is going to be phenomenal at basically everything. It can basically get up hazards, get rid of them. It can obviously break. It can outspeed a lot of mons. It can run bulk up. So I think Jay really started off the draft right with a lot of versatility. There's kind of this, I would say, gap in the top mons, and Great Tusk is maybe kind of in limbo of that gap. But I think just picking it up, getting all of your roles kind of checked off is really, really nice. It can work in Sun, which is great for handling some opponents. It can also be great just to get up your own Sun, get that booster energy, maybe run a choice item as well. It can be really versatile in that sense. And this is the Terra type too as well.
No, this is not his character. He actually has one of the more interesting Terra Capsules, which I'm excited to talk about when we get to
Oh,
it.
yes.
He has a really cool one. I really like his, actually. But yeah, great mon. The best glue mon in the format. I think even more than Lando this gen, obviously, with Lando getting nerfed. It is just the perfect glue piece. I loved this Pokemon on BBR last season. I'm sure Jay will love it this season. It's incredible. Next up, we have Dazzling Teptile with another Pokemon I had last BBR season, actually. The kind of the core together. We have Iron Moth here, and this is a Terra All Iron Moth, which makes it pretty darn incredible. This thing is incredibly fast, incredibly strong, has insane coverage, and is really, really threatening offensively. Now, it doesn't get Quiver like its brother Volcarona, but it's more immediately powerful, so you're not as locked into running, like kind of setup variants and things like that, but you can Agility, and you can Fiery Dance up and, kind of boost up your special attack in that way. You obviously have access to boost energy either in your speed or your special attack pretty easily, which is great. Draft League player can click U-turn. You also get access to Toxic Spikes and Morning Sun and things like that. With its solid SPDEF, it can function as a decent SPDEF pivot to certain threats and things like that, while still being very scary offensively. And with that Terra option, you obviously gain any coverage that you want. Terra Water is great. Terra Grass is great. You can lose that 4 times weakness. Terra Flying is also very solid on Moth. I've used a Terra All Moth before, and it was really, really fun to use. So it really kind of ups this Pokemon's offensive and defensive viability. It's going to be a pretty fun Pokemon for dashing to build around. Might be a little bit early for a Moth, in my opinion. He probably could have got this on the way back, because there's some crazy stuff on the board if you guys haven't noticed still. But it's definitely a really, really good Mon, and it's immensely better with Terra also. I'm sure it'll be a great Mon to build around nonetheless.
Completely agreed. I mean, that's the theme of the gen. Immediate hyper offense, and Iron Moth just does it. Kind of on the flip side, Annihilate is there. This Mon is going to be crazy with... I mean, I guess it got Terra. It's not actually the Terra Captain, but man.
Not.
No,
it's
not.
Right?
I
forgot about that. That's
I'm actually
crazy.
really hyped over that.
That's crazy. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yes, there were a lot of Mons for dashing to pick up. Annihilate was one of them, but I think this Mon without Terra is still really, really good. Just being able to get access to Rage Fist, U-turn, Knock, CC, Drain Punch, really good coverage. You can run it kind of in the back. You can run it just to take some hits and boost up that Rage Fist. You also got access to Rocks, which is really nice. And 2, I would say, kind of slept on abilities in Defiant and Vital Spirit. Sometimes being able to just get the ability to, wave off some sleeps is really, really nice. And I think Annihilate, just being able to set up and maybe run like Taunt or Encore with stabs is your bread and butter right there. Just sticking with that, I think Pat Mac is going to have a really fun time with this Mon. It is awesome.
Oh yeah, great Pokemon. It doesn't die, ever. Next up, we have Walking Wake from Brody. I wonder what he's going to draft, what team style he's going to go for, but this Pokemon is, obviously Sun Abuser, to the utmost degree. Having a water type that's stronger in the sun is actually incredibly valuable and very hard for a team to switch into when you take into conjunction that it gets access to Flamethrower, and obviously its secondary stab in Draco Meteor and Dragon Pulse. This Pokemon is very hard to switch into, especially with that Terra Captain slapped on top of it, which Brody is. Obviously, you can be more versatile with it. Terra Fairy, Walking Wake is very good. You might go water most of the time, but there might be a matchup where there's a water that you just can't break through, so you decide to go Terra Electric and get basically Thunderbolt for free, which can obviously be very, very valuable. This thing is great with a booster energy outside of Sun, but really it's going to function phenomenally in Sun with a Scarf and a special attack boosting set, with a Specs and a speed boosting set, or even vice versa. Maybe a Life Orb, maybe an Assault Vest too, because Water Dragon is a very solid typing defensively. There's a lot that this Pokemon can do. Oh geez, I'm so sorry. I was so confused. There's an ad in the middle of this glitch 2-hour remix. I apologize, guys. I was like, who is talking in my ear right now? What is going on? But yeah, definitely a very solid Pokemon. Sorry, Brody, kind of cut out your thunder there. But I like the Walking Wake pick a lot. I think it's a really fun Mon. And I think Sun is obviously the best it's ever been this gen, and it'll be the best it ever will be, and things like that. So definitely a good time.
Up next, we got Chiyu. This Mon is, I would say, the better Lele of this generation. It can basically carve through teams with Dark Pulse, Flamethrower. It's really, it's not that versatile, but it basically does the one thing so immensely well that it is absolutely worth having on your team. This Mon can just break any team, whether it is a Blissey on the other side of the field, doesn't matter. You got Overheat, Flamethrower, Dark Pulse, and you also have access to Nasty Plot and Flame Charge if you really feel like setting up. But just running those choice sets is going to be the main form of offense for the San Antonio Spars. I'm actually super scared for this Mon to show up against me, because I really don't want my Palafin to be the de facto switch-in. But man, this Mon just doesn't really have a switch-in. It's Azu and then the rest.
Nope, it doesn't. And even then, it has Wish to whittle down its checks, and with Hazards, this thing's a monster. So 100%. It is very hard to beat defensively. You typically aren't going to.
No.
Alright, next up we have me, and I know why I picked this Pokemon. So I can go ahead and talk about it. I picked a Spectrian. For those of you who've been around the channel for a while, you'll probably know I was the biggest Spectrian hitter in Gen 8. I'm not the biggest fan of the Pokemon in the generation because it really struggles with not only normals, which a lot of ghosts do, to be fair, but it really, really struggles with darks, not having access to any fighting or fairy coverage back in that gen. I could Willow and whittle them down, but rest variants, Lum variants, Scarf variants, special variants, things like that, it really had a tough time breaking through them. And yes, you could draft partners that broke through them, but what's making them stay in? You know what I mean? So I was never the biggest on Spectre and Passions, but I think solely getting access to the move Draining Kiss made this Pokemon's viability jump tenfold for me personally, because while those normals are still annoying, there's like none in Paldea decks. If you look at the Pokedex, there's no normal types in this dex, like whatsoever. And then now we can whittle down those dark types much better with Willow and Draining Kiss, and then having access to Nasty Plot, Calm Mind, and I think it got Agility this gen. I don't know if it had it last gen, but I know it has it this gen for a fact. So a good way to boost our speed, which can be incredible with Grimnay, functions as a special Moxie. I think this Pokemon, in conjunction with hazards and status spam and things like that, is very overwhelming for a lot of teams. I can't Terra this thing because it would be super objectively broken if I could Terra it. So this will not be my Terra Cat of the season. But I honestly, again, bias included, I think this Pokemon fell way too far in Paldea decks, personally. I think it's fell really far. So definitely really cool.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
No.
This is my guy. This is my guy in Gen 8. We do have Lando T rounding out the draft, and you know, I think 14's maybe a little harsh for it. But man, I love this mon. Just getting access to Great Stab and Earthquake. You got U-Turn as well. It is going to be just a fun pivot. Also getting access, you know, to Intimidate is really nice as well. Just being able to show up, get the Intimidate off, pivot around wherever you need. And I think this Pokemon is just such a glue. A little less versatile than Great Tusk is. Great Tusk is basically just the better version.
Lando.
A little more expensive.
Lando and cooler Lando.
It really is cooler Lando. It's sad, but you know what?
I do think this is really good value.
Somebody else. I think it is very good value too, especially just being the wheel. You get to pair this up. Personally, in Gen 8, what I would do is I would get it with like 2 really strong waters, one like more offensive, one more defensive, and then like a Glow King of sorts, and then a really good fighting. But I think Starfish actually went a little bit differently with this, and I'm actually really interested to see how this goes.
It's a very interesting Terra Cap too. We'll see if he ends up doing that. All right, that's the last pick of round 1. We can look at our round recap. Is there anything that stands out to you, Marcus?
I think again, Torrentee did fall pretty darn far. Spectre, I think the real selling point on Spectre is its speed. Again, as you'll see, the speed tiers in terms of like the quality mons really start to fall off. There's very few that you can pick from later on in the draft. So getting a fast mon now that you can consistently bring is going to be really clutch. And a lot of these coaches got to do it very well.
Oh yeah, no, you can see speed was a priority for a lot of coaches. I also agree. I think the Tornfall was the biggest steal of the round, and if not that, then the Zamazenta was obviously big for me as well, because I'm a big band Zama guy. I don't know, maybe I'll die on that hill, but definitely some really cool pickups. Again, I appreciate you guys tuning in so far. If you want to drop a like on the stream, we got 46 people here, only 27 likes. Well, we gotta get at least to 40 right now, right? All right, that being said, we'll jump into round 2. We'll start up with Star and his round 2 pick in Roaring Moon. Do you want to talk about Roaring Moon here?
I'm down. Roaring Moon, again, you know, it's a fast mon. It is an immense threat. Obviously not the Terra Captain, because this mon would be so busted as an Omni Terramon in basically any format. But just its ability to run Booster Energy, DD, Acrobatics, even some like pivoting sets with U-Turn, I think might be kind of interesting. I'm not exactly sure what Starfish was thinking picking this, but just seeing these 2 mons off the bat, you got 2 very solid U-Turners. You do have a bit of an ice weakness that's forming. But aside from that, you have a very present physical offense, just right off the bat. And you can control the game that way with your speed and your attack. Very simple.
And it's the coolest design Pokemon of the gen, so there you go.
True.
Speaking of Roaring Moon, Carolina Roaring Moons, I'm going to pick up Sneasler. And again, bias included, I'll hold that. But I personally think this is the best pair that Spectre has ever gotten in Draft League. I think this Pokemon alongside it, with the amount of status this thing can spread, with not only Poison Touch and getting poisons when it clicks U-Turn and close combat, which is really obnoxious for teams to deal with, and not really blockable by Covert Cloak because it's from its ability. But also getting access to Dire Claw. With Poison Touch plus Dire Claw, I think giving like something like damn near a 50% chance to get poisoned or status or something like that. Really gross if you're not holding a Covert Cloak. This thing is going to come in, is going to spread status while clicking U-Turn and Dire Claw and close combat and whatever it may be. But it is also going to really beat down those normals and darks that Spectre doesn't appreciate, which is phenomenal for it. It whittles down the zone checks with the status we were talking about. Poison Touch is a great ability for it, but it also has access to Unburden and Swords Dance and Bulk Up, so there are definitely sets that we can rock out with SD and bulk up to try and boost our special or our attack, and then boost our speed and sweep and clean the end game. This is my Terra captain, so I think this Pokemon with Terra is going to be very solid. Whether it be stabs, I think ground is a phenomenal option. I could even see water and fire and a bunch of different options really coming. Terra flying is great for the unburdened sets with acrobatics in its disposal. It might be the ugliest Pokemon of all time. I violently despise this thing's design. I think it is disgusting looking. I hate its fingers and its stupid face, and the fact that it's just long Sneasel. But I can't deny that it's very good, and it's going to be a very good Spectre partner in my opinion. So, definitely a cool pair at the least. Not a cool mon. I almost said cool mon. Not a cool mon.
What's nice is you don't have to look at this thing from the front ever again.
Thank
as soon as you send that thing
my
in,
opponent does. That's the mind game. My opponent does, and when they turn away to throw up, I'm gonna click close combat and get a crit.
Up next, we got Iron Treads. Again, another glue, just like Great Tusk. Just being able to get up rocks, being able to spin. Very nice speed tier, and also getting the coveted steel type, which there are maybe 10 viable steels in this format. So just having that is really awesome. Being able to run booster energy is also really nice. And having access to like Iron Defense sets, potentially being able to set up and get your bulk up as well, will be very threatening for this mon. So this mon, a little less offensively present than maybe Great Tusk. I would say maybe by a lot. But that being said, its setup potential is nice. Its ability to get up rocks, its ability to volt switch around too, I think is a little bit slept on as well. So just being able to get in and out.
Yeah, and getting a steel type, again, is obviously so clutch in this gen where there's none of them. So definitely a really good pickup. All right, next up we have Brody grabbing the Meowscarada. Definitely an interesting pick. I thought he was immediately going to secure the Sun because Sun isn't only good with something like Walking Wake or like in past gens where Sun was really only good if you got Venusaur. Now Sun is good with half of the Pokemon above 15 points. So Sun is a really, really sought after thing. So Brody's taking a little bit of a risk going the Meowscarada, but this gives him that speed that we were talking about. Not a lot of teams are getting access to that speed very early on. Or are going to get access to it later on. Sorry. So getting that is going to be great. Getting spikes for your Roaring Moon is great. Also getting a Pokemon that can force in some types of, fairy types and, chip them down for Wake to be able to spam Draco and things like that is great. As well as grabbing great momentum and knocking off items, which not a lot of Pokemon get access to this generation. So being able to consistently knock things off is going to be very, very clutch for Brody. I love Meowscarada. I think it's a great Pokemon. Even if it's just a spike spot, 90% of matchups, it's going to do its job well. It's really going to support Moonmo because Moon loves those hazards. So good stuff.
Especially with T-Spikes too, just being able to potentially whittle stuff down as soon as, Hydra's Steam starts popping off, it's going to make the sweeps that much easier. Up next, with Pat Mac and the Sacramento Sandslash, we got the Terra Captain Garchomp. This mon being Omni-Terra, I think is absolutely insane. Obviously, Annihilate, some can definitely debate that it would be the better Terra Captain, but I'm really interested to see how Garchomp goes. Obviously, you have rocks, spikes, and you have phenomenal setup in SD. It did lose access to Scale Shot, but that being said, it is still a great breaker and a great potential cleaner as well. I think the Scarf Garchomp set, which sometimes sees its usage, definitely sees its usage more in draft than in other formats, with an Omni-Terra is going to be pretty insane as well. So a lot of versatility with this. You can obviously also run like some bulky set if there's really a problem that you're dealing with. And with a mon like Garchomp that can really do it all, as a Terra Captain, you don't really have to focus that much on getting those specific types or, being able to handle very, very specific matchups. If you really just feel like it, you can always just Terra the Garchomp, and that just might help out and, win 1 week alone.
For sure. Next up, we have Greninja here from Dashing. This is a really cool Pokemon. I love Gren. I know a lot of people are really down on Gren this gen because of the fact that Protean did get nerfed, but I think of it this way, right? Gren, when Protean was not allowed on it, was a really, really good Pokemon, right? It was debatably, like a really early round 2 pick. You saw it a lot on wheels and things like that because of its great speed tier, great coverage, and access to spikes and toxic spikes in U-turn. That's really all it needs. Now, it can run Protean, which can be great in some matchups, but it can also run, a nerfed Battle Bond. Again, these abilities are worse than they were before, but they are better than what Torrent Gren was, and I think that makes this Pokemon incredibly, incredibly valuable. Now, Battle Bond this gen, if you guys don't know, it gives you an attack, special attack, and speed boost one time when you knock out a Pokemon. Pokemon. So not as good as Ash Gren necessarily, but it gives Gren that setup sweeping potential, which getting that special attack boost and that speed boost is great for something like Greninja, which can sometimes lack a little bit in the raw power, at least not in raw power, more so in OHKO potential. So that's going to be great, but Choice Specs variants are still great. Heavy Duty Boot sets are still great. Focus Sash leads to get up a bunch of hazards for your Iron Moth is also great. And I think that the combination of Gren plus Iron Moth is a really solid combo here for dashing. And I love the Pokemon a lot. I think it's really good.
Up next, we got Zapdos, and this is the Terra Captain, no?
Nope, it's even later. We have...
Oh shit, I gotta look further.
Yeah, no, it is far down there. He is actually, I think he'll be the last Terra Captain that we talk about is JV's.
I do see it. Oh, that's right. Oh, that's a fun Terra Captain. But I think these two right here, I mean, Zapdos is such a Gluemon. You're basically just sticking Elmer's to Gorilla Glue and just having that be your core. You got a lot of potential in just bring a lot of bulk. You can also bring a lot of offense. Zapdos is one of those mons that you can really do a lot with, and just having access to those pivoting options in Volt Switch and U-Turn can be very interesting as well. No defog, but that being said, when you have a great Tusk along your side, you know, you don't really have to rely on Zapdos for defogging potential. You do have a little bit of a nice weakness, so I'm looking to see what JV maybe shores up. But that's, you know, I always talk about ice weaknesses. I'm always saying, you know, everything's ice weak.
Yeah.
But that being said, Zapdos, again, very solid mon overall. And especially in a hyper-offensive meta where you have a lot of frail attackers that can just clean, having a mon that can take a hit and then also be strong enough to revenge a lot of those mons can be pretty useful as well.
100%. Next up, we have the Bear. This Pokemon, again, you want to talk about no switch-ins. This Pokemon has none of them. Guts, Flame Orb, boosted Facades, absolutely nuke through everything. And if you think about, okay, what resists normal in this generation? Well, we have, obviously, Rock types and Steel types. Well, those catch headlong rushes to the face. Not only that, the Pokemon that can naturally take hits because of their higher bulk get blown up by Swords Dance variants. Really, the only check to this thing in this meta is going to be something like a Corviknight, because this is not his Terra Captain, like the Torn. We said the Torn is. But even then, it's not like Corvi beats this thing 1v1. If it slaps on a +2 Fire Punch or a Thunder Punch, it's getting blown up into it KO'd anyways. It's not like it can roost up on this. This Pokemon is just Wall Breaker incarnate, alongside incredible bulk that really never lets it get O-code. I think Assault Vest Ursaluna is also a very slept on set. It has incredible special bulk, and we can shore up that stat with a really high HP stat. It gets access to Trailblaze to boost its speed. You can even be bulk up for more bulkier variants. You have incredible coverage. You have that early gen mon coverage where you have your stab options, plus access to every elemental punch and every coverage move you might need. This Pokemon is going to be very, very solid for Bruno, and he has Torn that gives it the opportunities to come in. When those flying resists come in, those rock and steel types as well, that's when we get into Ursula. When those specially defensive mons, when those AV mons that are there to check Torn come in, you click U-turn, and then you click Facade or Headlong Rush, and you win the game. And it's going to be a good time. So definitely a solid pickup. I really want to try the Bear on Wi-Fi. It's a super cool mon too. One of my favorite Hisuian mon designs. So really, really sick mon. Good to see.
Up next, we got Big Backs in the middle. I really like this for Q, just having a mon that can break through physically, just to pair alongside Enamorous. Great stabs in Dragon and Ice, especially when the steals are absolutely not anywhere to be seen. Steals like Corviknight are still going to take a lot to the face. You know, I feel like you're going to have to deal with mons, this guy with like a lot of bulky waters, like Dondozo and stuff like that, like Rotom Wash. But you still get set up on half the time. And with Dondozo, there's still some interesting tech that you can pull off. But that being said, I am really, really excited to see this like offensive core. It is a little bit cliche because you got the Dragon Steel and it's kind of been like a Gen 9 metagame. So it's kind of like a new take, I guess. But I'm really interested to see this attack just pop off.
Oh yeah, ridiculously strong Pokemon. Next up, we have John Jr. with a very early Hoopa Unbound, but I see where John was coming from. I believe this is going to be John's Terra Captain this season, an 11-point Hoopa Unbound that can turn into any typing, shed that really, bad defensive typing of Psychic and Dark, turn into anything, or just get a ridiculous stab boost on its Hyperspace Furies and things like that. It's going to be very tough to switch into. Now, Hoopa's big weakness is speed tier, right? Speed tier is a really bad defense stat, but I'd say more so it's speed tier, because you can kind of position yourself around, bad defensive stats if you have a lot of speed. But this Pokemon against fatter builds, against slower threats, is going to be Wall Breaker. Incarnate, it's going to come in, it's going to tear it, and it's going to kill something. It's going to be very difficult to position around this Pokemon. And if John goes the more balanced route that you typically see Zamazenta go in, and he gets a lot of hazards, and he gets good momentum into Hoopa, this is going to be a great breaker. 11-point Hoopa, I think, while Hoopa isn't broken, like, you know, a lot of times, I remember back in the Gen 7 days where a couple people were, when I first started playing, where leagues were banning Hoopa because he's very strong. And not really seeing anything beyond that. It's obviously not bannable good, but I do think it's a little bit better than 11. I'd probably put it up, you know, in that 13, 14 range. So good value from John, and I know he loves using this Pokemon. So definitely a solid pickup from him.
Up next, we got Cinderace, and the theme of the team for T-Row is fast and loose. You are going to be getting off a lot of damage, and you're going to be pivoting into anything else. This team needs a little bit of a glue, but as soon as it gets it, this team is going to be very scary. You really don't have a lot of switch-ins in Terra Iron Bundle, and Cinderace really puts a lot of pressure on the defense as well. Just being able to get Pyro Balls off, being able to get its own stabs with High Jump Kick, and Zen Headbutt, potentially U-turn. And if you got hazards up to maybe deal with stuff, it can court change as well. So it really is going to be fast and loose. I think these games are going to be decided just by a few key moments in the game. Just maybe a double, maybe a read. But I think T-Row has a very strong offensive core going into the third round.
And maybe a miss, too. Look at this team.
Yeah.
Next up, we have mid grabbing Espathra, which is definitely going to be his Terra captain. It's weird because this is a Pokemon that I personally think is not worth drafting without Terra. I think it sucks without Terra. But with Terra, it becomes a whole different threat. Now, in the Smogon Seed, this was obviously banned for its cheesy shenanigans, setting up Calm Minds, speed boosting, and sword powering through. But where Espathra really shines in draft, in my opinion, is those Lumina Crash sets, being really strong, throwing a Life Orb on there, and really having a tough time, you know, opponents having a tough time switching in. Between Lumina Crash dropping special defense, having access to Dazzling Gleam and Shadow Ball is great coverage options, and then either being able to Terra Fighting, Terra Fire, or throw off one of, you know, a Terra Psychic, you know, Fairy, or whatever it might be, Ghost, to really break through a lot of teams. This Pokemon can be really scary in the endgame, and it forces a lot of specific prep. And while you might be prepping for those Lumina Crash sets, that's when the Calm Mind Sword power set comes. And if you don't have the correct means of chipping this thing down and forcing it out or breaking it before it sweeps you, it's going to be a bad time. So again, very annoying Pokemon to build for. This team is incredibly annoying to build for in general so far. So definitely some good stuff from mid. I'm not big on non-Terra Espathra, but Terra All Espathra is going to be very difficult for a lot of people to build for.
Up next, we got this is my mom.
Your boy, yeah.
And this was right before me too. So it was at this moment in the draft where I fell to my knees in the Whole Foods. It was terrible to see, but Pult plus Glow King is absolutely insane. And Glow King this gen got a little bit of a glow up as well, getting access to Toxic, gaining access to T-Spikes, and gaining access to Chilly Reception. This mon can really do it all at this point, getting up hazards, being able to run a lot of interesting special sets, being able to set up whether it's defenses, Spadef. You could even run a Curse sometimes. I've run it for like Mega Diancie, obviously that's not here, but you can really do it all with this mon. It is only limited by your creativity, and just pairing that with such a staple in Dragapult is going to be really awesome. I'm excited to see what Obo can do with this. This is a core I was never able to get, but I really want to see how this mon pops off. This isn't the Terra Captain. The Terra Captain's up next for the Seattle Sandstorm. But again, just pairing these two together, getting a lot of speed, a lot of uniqueness with the Slow King, I think is really awesome. And getting up hazards, especially a T-Spike in this gen, can be the difference, especially for a Hex user like Pult, or just being able to whittle stuff down with Spec Shadow Ball.
Oh, 100%. Good stuff. Pult Glow King is a gross core, and you typically didn't see it in Gen 8 because nobody would let it happen, because Glow King was going round 1 too, so getting it late round 2 is awesome. Next up, we have Marcus picking up big Landoi, and I think this was also a very big underprice. This is a great pickup for you right here. This Pokemon, it did lose access to Rock Polish, so I think that's the biggest. It's even worse than Landorus in my opinion, because while Landorus T in my opinion, because like Lando T still has great defensive utility, is a great rocker, U-turn, things like that, functions a little bit more defensively. Lando I love slotting on 4th move Rock Polish just to set up and win the game later on, so definitely a nerf to it, but this Pokemon is still incredibly strong. This thing does not have switch-ins, especially when you take into account that this is Marcus's Terra captain. So whether it be, Terra Grounds, Earth Powers, or Sandseer Storms, if you're feeling a little extra crazy for some reason that day, you have access to Rock Slide, which is Sheer Force boosted, Sludge Bomb, which is Sheer Force boosted, and then we're also getting access to any coverage moves that we want. If we want to go Terra Ice, if we want to go Terra Water, Terra Fire, Terra Electric, you can do so with this Landorus. It did get access to Nasty Plot this gen, so that plus its, Sheer Force Life Orb boosted attacks is going to just be an absolute nuke on everything. There's not anything that really switches into that. It's great mixed. It's great, especially offensively, even physically offensive. If you want to go physical sword stance, it can go really well there. It's a great rocker. Again, losing knockoff is a big boon, but I think at 15 points, this is an absolute steal considering you are allowed to tear it, and definitely a really good pickup here in round 2.
Up next, we got Hisuian Zoroark. I think this mon could have maybe gone a little later. That being said, Hisuian Zoroark at that speed tier and just having those illusion shenanigans can really make or break any single game week. You can really mess with opponents by bringing certain stuff, leading off, baiting and switching. But Hisuian Zoroark, especially with normal and ghost, it has a really unique combo of stabs, and it can just slice through teams. Very similar to Iron Valiant, especially just having like a spec set. I do usually see this mon show up at the start of games, just being able to break through teams. And I think that's going to set up Iron Valiant really nicely, whether that is a physical or special variant, just to sweep in the end. Because at the end of the day, that is what Iron Valiant does best. It's just getting a booster energy with speed and then picking off the rest of the mons. And I think Hisuian Zoroark, as long as your opponent's not 100% sure that it's the Zoroark, it's going to be doing some unnecessary chip to the team, and it's going to make sweeping that much easier, especially with some of the mons that Thomas drafted in the later rounds.
For sure. All right, and then the last pickup round with Goldango. I think this is a great pickup by Jay Reiki here. Again, grabbing a Pokemon that massacres the 2.5 fairies that are in the decks, allowing it to catch U-turns in from the Urshifu, and then just click Make It Ring, Shadow Ball, or Focus Blast. You also get access to Dazzling Gleam and Thunderbolt. Nasty Plot and Recover is also a great option. And this Pokemon, as long as Jay Ricky decides to get Hazards later, is going to be nasty with Urshifu. Always blocking any kind of hazard removal unless your name is Moldbreaker Halusha or you draft Mousehold on purpose. And either way, it's not going to be a good time for opposing teams because those spikes, T-spikes, and rocks are going to stay up forever with good as gold blocking any kind of status move. And it's also a great status absorber. You can't Will-O-Wisp it, you can't Thunder Wave it. It's obviously immune to Toxic even without the ability. So this Pokemon, very solid pairing for Urshifu. And provided he gets the hazard support that he needs later on, is really going to facilitate that top pick to just come in and click Wicked Blow and win video games. So definitely a good pickup from Jay Ricky right here. Then we have the end of round 2. This is our recap right here. We're going to start speeding along a little bit faster. The first 2 rounds are typically the most exciting ones. You see the best Pokemon go then. So we've been going a little bit longer with these ones. We're going to start going through a little bit quicker. But with that being said, is there any standouts to you in round 2, Marcus?
I think, not to be biased, but I think my Lando Eye is pretty cool. And then I also love Glow King. If it were me, I'd have that on my team, but Lando Eye, I think is, not that bad of an alternative. I think Garchomp is really nice as well. And Sneasler, just pairing it with Spectrier, I think is really cool as well. Because you just have the monopoly on speed in whatever matchup you run. And in such a hyper-offensive metagame, sometimes the speed just dictates the match.
100%. Make sure you pick one screen. You'll make it to final. Your one screen Goldango is the greatest Goldango of all time. Shouts to John. Next up. Oop. Sorry, I totally forgot that this is what I have to do. We're not Roaring Moon next up. Next up. Oops. There we go. You see all the picks a little bit early. Apparently, I was at the end of the round when I checked it last time. I need to double check the next time. We have Azumarill, which I think is going to be an incredible pickup for Jay Ricky right here. I'm a big Azu stan this gen. I think it is so good at checking the top end of the metagame, especially when all of them are Terra banned like they are in this league. It really does soft check 90% of the top end of the board, which is incredible. On top of that, it's one of the very few fairies. On top of that, it's still incredible offensively, whether it be Belly Drum or the more common Choice Band. I think Assault Vest Azu is great this gen. I think that Rest Talk Azu is great this gen. Physically defensive like Rocky Helmet sets. Even Thick Fat variants are going to be very, very solid. But yeah, definitely a great pickup for Jay Ricky here. Solid value too, only in 13 points. Now, that's where it should be priced, but he's able to secure that lower, mid-tier fairy before everybody else starts getting it. That's the benefit of being at the wheel. You're able to kind of secure the core that you want, you need really, really early on. So definitely a good pickup for Jay Ricky here.
Up next, we got Ting Lu for Thomas, and Ting Lu is just going to be a very nice mon to switch into. Obviously, you don't really want Zorak or Valiant to take a whole lot of damage, so just having access to Ting Lu to take hits, get up rocks, get up spikes, whirlwind, so it's not super passive, is going to be very clutch. You know, a team this offensively, it just needs one mon to be able to take hits, and if you had to pick any mon in the meta to just take a single hit, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5, it would probably be Ting Lu every single time. This mon just does not die.
No, I've never seen it get O-code, ever. Literally never seen it get O-code. And we've been playing this for like 6 months. Next up, speaking of never getting O-code, unless it's a fighting move, and even then, it probably doesn't happen very often. You have King Gambit right here. Now, I think if you didn't have the lander, this is probably the Terra Captain. It's very good with Terra, but I think it's very good without. It's one of the very few steel types in the format. It sets up rocks very reliably, has 2 incredible abilities in both Defiant and Supreme Overlord, making yourself way, way stronger whenever your team ends up dying. And I think especially when you have such an offensive top 2, getting that King Gambit, as those Pokemon start to go down as they're coming in wall breaking, King Gambit can honestly be a phenomenal cleaner with access to Sucker Punch, Swords Dance. It can obviously Iron Head and Kowtow Cleave. Now, if this thing got knockoff, oh my god, it would be so good.
No.
But it does get access to Kowtow Cleave, which is reliable, strong Dark Stab, which is really, really nice. It can also low kick and do different things like that. Again, nothing too crazy from King Gambit. You're either going to see like Rocks variants or Swords Dance variants, and that's typically it. Maybe an AV here or there. Maybe a Choice Band if you're feeling extra crazy. But what it does very well, and it's a very good pickup here. It gives you the Dark type, it gives you the Steel type, and those things are really hard to come by right now, and it gives you a little bit of a defensive backbone. Again, another Pokemon, it is very hard to OHKO a King Gambit. Unless you're clicking a Stab, Fighting, Close Combat, or Focus Blast, you might not be OHKOing, especially if, it might even be Chople Berry in the matchup too. So, we'll see. Definitely a great pickup, great Ghost Check as well.
Up next, we have Urshifu Rapid Strike, which is going to be the Omni Terra Captain for Oboe. And this mon, again, just kind of like Urshifu, it can do so much this gen. It has access to Sword Stance finally. It has access to the Punching Glove boosts that it can run with Surging Strikes, which I think was way more relevant on this mon in Gen 8 than with Urshifu Sickle Strike. Obviously, just being able to hit 3 times, it means you're going to basically lose half your health to a Rocky Helmet. So not only having that contact removal, but also having that boost is very nice. Obviously, there were protective pads, but actually getting a damage buff from Punching Gloves is going to be absolutely insane. You can U-turn around, you can bulk up, again, SD. But I think the scariest thing about this mon is Trailblaze. Just being able to set up and then have the liberty to choose whatever move you want to sweep with is really nice as well. So just great offensive glue in Urshifu Rapid.
Always good to get your good offensive fighting alongside Pult too, because everything that Pult doesn't like, Urshifu likes to click a button against, outside of Fairies, which you have Glow King for. So a really good starting 3 for Oboe. I really like this team so far. Next up, speaking of glue mons, we have Rotom Wash here to kind of just come in, Volt Switch around, get in the Chien-Pao, get in the Espathra, and let them do some damage. Rotom is a very simple mon. It doesn't do anything super crazy, especially losing access to a lot of the status it had before, and Toxic especially. Not a lot of the status, but losing Toxic and losing Defog and Plane Split, all pretty considerable nerfs, but Rotom, it stands the test of time. It always does well in every generation it's in, no matter what its move pool options are. That water and electric typing alongside Levitate as an ability is so incredible defensively. It's so good at volting in, and the things that check Rotom and Dragons and Grasses, the only things that really, can come in on those Volt Switches are just Chien-Pao food, which is good. That the whole point of Chien-Pao is getting it in as much as possible, as it is hard to position in without having good momentum into it, and this is probably one of the best pairs to, get that POW in to click a button and win the game. So good pickup by mid here.
Up next, we got Corviknight, and I think this was the right mon for the draft. Just getting a mon that can be slow and U-turn back out into the offense is really nice. Just having a nice little respite from just absolutely demolishing your opponent is nice sometimes when you can not be passive and just U-turn. It doesn't do a whole lot offensively, which is really fine just because the other mons do. You do have that Iron Defense Body Press set as well, which is nice. And having access to Defog is nice, especially when you can free up boots off of one of these 2 slots potentially. Because you don't want these guys to always run boots, and you don't always want them to take 25 either. So just having this option, I think, was the correct choice. Not that, in draft there's a lot of options. I think this was definitely the best one for T-Row for sure.
Oh, for sure. Fits team really well. Next up, we have a mascot pick, John Jr., grabbing some more offense, which typically you see Zama teams go a different route, but we're seeing a lot of offense here. The Portland Nightshaders pick up the Portland Nightshader himself in Gengar. Very solid Pokemon. One of the very few offensive ghosts in this generation, and in my opinion, Ghost is the best offensive type in the metagame. Just because of the fact there is no pursuit, so there's not really a lot of punishes for Shadow Ball being clicked anymore. On top of that, there's no ghost immunities in this gen. There's no good normal types. My boy Dunsparce is sitting alone in that regard. Other than that, everything just takes a chunk from Shadow Ball. And if you want to switch in your Dark type, you're going to take a Sludge Bomb, you're going to take a Focus Blast, a Dazzling Gleam, even a Will-O-Wisp if you want to get a little bit more cheeky with Gengar. Again, a Pokemon with a lot of good utility moves, but realistically, a lot of the time, it doesn't really need it. It can kind of just come in, be Specs, Scarf, or Life Orb, click a button, and force some damage on something so that the rest of your team can do well. So really nice pickup here for John here in Gengar. Love this Pokemon. I think draft is where you see Gengar shine the most because of its offensive prowess and the ability to get it in. John needs a little bit of momentum to get these breakers in right now because things like Hoopa and Gengar struggle hitting the field otherwise. But if he can get the Volt Switch and the U-turn into them, he'll be in a good spot. Oh, there we go. There's next.
Up next, we got Fortress. This wasn't the one that Q actually took. Q had a choice that we were talking about between Scizor and Slowking, and he ended up taking Scizor, which turned into Fortress. I think this one's still pretty good. Obviously not around 3, but just the ability to get up hazards, spin, and then Volt Switch out into your very immediate offense, and then Amorous and Baxcalibur is very nice as well. It is a little bit passive, but being able to get out is very, very nice, and it just checks off the hazard boxes for Q. Nothing too special, but it really does what it does well. And he's actually going to pair this with a different steel, so it's not going to be the only thing that's going to be taking all those hits, which is nice.
Good ice resist as well. Very solid ice resist. Next up, we have Glamora. Lots of hazards here for the Chernobyl Dragalges right here. Toxic Debris, obviously a very solid ability. Getting hit by a physical move and allowing yourself to set up T-Spikes without ever clicking the move is very, very valuable. Even if your opponent has a good grounded poison, it puts them in a very awkward position where they kind of have to pivot around Glamora in a very weird way, or pivot around the rest of your team in a really weird way to avoid poisons on things you don't want poisons on. So that can be valuable. You have rocks, you have spikes, you have removal and mortal spin, so it gives him some removal on his team, which is great for non-boots torn variants, or even your Ursaluna doesn't appreciate spikes being up and willing it down on top of that Flame Orb chip, which is great. And offensively, I think people really sleep on how good this thing is offensively. Having access to poison and rock stab alongside Dazzling Gleam, Energy Ball, Earth Power, and a bunch of options like that makes this thing very annoying to deal with defensively. Rock Polish sets can definitely win games on their own, or even just Life Orb variants. I brought in like Life Orb 4 attacks Glamora, and it's done well. Corrosion sets are great with Toxic, poisoning anything you want to poison. Great Pokemon overall. Glamora is, a really solid pickup for this team. I like the spike support a lot.
Next, we have Hisuian Samurott, the spike stacker himself. I'm really excited to see this mod pop off in draft. I've used it a little bit, and it is basically as free as they say it is. You just click Ceaseless Edge, you get up the spikes, you leave, and that's all you really need to do. This mod, I think, frees up Zapdos and Great Tusk offensively a little bit, just being able to pressure. It's access to Sharpness plus Aqua Cutter, Ceaseless Edge. Apparently, it gets Knockoff. Who uses Knockoff on this mod? But apparently, it gets one of the best moves in the game still. And then also access to Sacred Sword is really nice too. Just being able to chip stuff down however you want and get the spike up in the process is going to make cleaning up so much easier. And it's also a really good type combo in Water and Dark. It can be run a little bit bulky, not that it's really a bulky mon, but it can also just break through teams, which is really nice. And it's going to free up Great Tusk and Zapdos in just the role that they have to do in the team. So I think Jay now has to use a defensive mon for his next pick, but I think he's just freeing up those slots.
I really like the Hammerrod. This is going to be my round 3. I was very upset when I went. This thing looks absolutely insane. I love Hisuian Samurott. That's good old D tier Hisuian Samurott. All right, next up we have Bronzong here. Again, a little bit early, but I understand the logic here from Dashing. There are no steel types. We're seeing a lot of them kind of get picked off the board and go early. Dashing wanted to secure his now, and that's what he ended up doing. Bronzong's very reliable. It can be a bit passive in a lot of instances, but it's a very reliable rocker. It's It's a very reliable, fairy resistant pivot into those things. I'm already awake, phone. Leave me alone. This is when I would normally be waking up. But very solid mod in that regards. Sets up rocks. Can be a little bit passive, but it's a great pivot into a lot of things. Great fairy resist. Great ground immunity as well. This team is very ground weak so far. Obviously only 2 mods before, but the move Earthquake was not very nice to this team. So having that ground immunity this early is going to be very solid. Good pickup in Bronzong.
Up next, we got Heatran for Pat Mac, and this mon I think is just going to alleviate a little bit of the roll compression, or the roll pressure for Garchomp and Annihilate. Just being able to get up rocks, it's very natural for Heatran to do, and it can also just Magma Storm, break some stuff down, and make it so that Garchomp and Annihilate are even more potent in the end game. It does lose access to Toxic, which is a bit of a bummer. Obviously, it's been re-tiered for that. And it also loses access to Eruption, so it doesn't really have that offensive presence that you can just surprise some people with, because it does have those special attack stats for sure. But I really like it. It's a very good glue for this team, and it has that special attack to kind of, I would say, balance the team out a little bit, considering that Garchomp, I would hope, runs usually physical, and Annihilate, if you see it running special, that's just a throw.
Yeah,
but
we see some special chomps. No Focus Blast Annihilates, unfortunately.
No.
I'm telling you right now, as a non-admin in the league, Pat Mech, you're kicked if you run Focus Blast on your Annihilate. I don't even know if it gets it, to be fair. But definitely a solid. I also wanted this Pokemon, so I'm very upset. Everybody took the mons I wanted in this round. This is like my biggest
Sniper's Row.
Oh, for sure. Now Brody is going to grab that Torkoal. So I think I told him, I was like, dude, if you don't grab Sun right now, that shit's going. Please grab your Sun so you're not screwed with the Sunless Walking Wake. So we ended up grabbing it right here. Again, obviously its point value is reflected. It's going to be a little bit lower because it really only functions on those Sun teams. But I think it was very important for Brody to grab it right now. It gives him a rocker, it gives him a rapid spinner as well. So nice little bit of removal. There's not a lot of reliable spin in this game right now. So having a spinner in Torkoal is going to be very solid. And again, it facilitates that Walking Wake. If he wants to get any other kind of, photosynthesis mon, it's going to be able to facilitate those, or any other fires or anything like that. It's really going to set up the table and set the table for the rest of his team to really pop off and do well. And it's very simple. It's not like Torkoal's going to do anything crazy. You're not running like Scarf Torkoal or Shell Smash or anything like that. You're just going to run physically defensive, or maybe a little bit of Spadef. You're going to set up rocks and rapid spin. You might Lava Plume and burn something, but you're going to make that Walking Wake an absolute monster and nuisance to switch into.
Absolutely. Up next for Will, we have Slowking. Slowking is just a really great pivoter at this point in this gen. Just being able to get in, regen out with Chilly Reception is really, really nice. It's not super passive too. Having access to Nasty and Calm Mind is really nice. Having access to Trick Room options as well. There's always one week where you really want to run Trick Room, Weakness Policy, and being able to have that just to kind of subvert expectations when all of your defensive effort is focused on stopping a Chi-Yu is very, very helpful. This mon can get in and get out, and it can bring in a lot of cool stuff too. Obviously, we see the Chi-Yu. Obviously, we see the Iron Treads. Maybe if Will wants to get rid of hazards, or set up maybe an Iron Defense or Volt Switch around a little bit more as well. And so just being able to get in a lot of these stronger Pokemon is going to be really big, and maybe offering Hail support to a certain Pokemon would also be nice.
For sure. Definitely, I love me some Slowking. One of my favorite mods in draft. Then, next up, we have me. I grabbed Sylveon. Again, I feel like this is the round where those fairies and those steels were going. I originally wanted Hammerot, that ended up going, and then I also wanted Heatran, and that ended up going, so I ended up kind of going a completely different route, which is weird to replace those two Pokemon with Sylveon, but I really wanted to grab it now. Again, I mentioned it before, there's no good fairies in this format, and Sylveon was really like one of the last really good ones left. I liked it for the wish support, I liked it for the fighting resist, because while Sneasler does resist fighting, it doesn't Hammerod. Hisuian Samurai. We like to abbreviate things for Pokemon players. Sylveon is definitely going to be a really solid pickup here. It gets momentum in Baton Pass, which is obviously very nice. It clicks Hyper Voice or Moonblast if we're scared of Throat Chop shenanigans. It can Calm Mind up. It's just going to be very reliable at what it does. Again, a little bit worse offensive this gen, not having access to Mystical Fire anymore, but very solid nonetheless. And, a good pivot to get in other threats on our team, at the very least.
Up next, we got the Terra Captain for Starfish's team. This is Skeledirge at 13 points. It is, I think, a very solid type, or a Terra Captain. Just being able to turn it to any type with this mon, get off of Willow and start setting up with Torch Song, I think is really, really awesome. I've actually even seen it run some curse sets which is maybe a little cursed for my liking, but it is,
Oh,
I
really?
think, a very versatile Pokemon. Yeah, I've seen it run, what is it? Curse,
Jeez.
Flare Blitz, Earthquake, Slack Off. Absolutely wild stuff.
With like
But
I'm assuming a Terra typing that makes it a not ghost anymore, yeah?
yeah, it's Terra
Okay,
Water.
I was gonna say, I was like, well, I don't know about that one. I don't know.
That's a little too crazy for my
Yeah.
liking. Maybe Amo can run that one week.
Yeah.
But yes, this mon is super versatile in the draft. It is such a nuisance. And again, when we're just talking about Glumons going round 3, which is kind of the theme of this draft, getting offense and then getting your glue, this mon at 13 points is very good at this point range for sure. Just being such a nuisance and tailor typing your defensive type for whatever is going to be in front of you. I think it's very, very convenient.
Guaranteed check to whatever you want. And Hammerot is a thing. Don't tell me Hammerot's not a thing. That's the abbreviation. What are you gonna?
I'll make it a thing.
Are you gonna call it? No, everybody in chat's yelling at me, telling me a Hammerot is not the abbreviation. You tell me the abbreviation, then chat. Are you just gonna call it Rot? That's gross. It's Hammerot.
You call it Glow King, but you're not going to call the other Hammerot.
Exactly.
Like, we got to be consistent.
Bam! Thank you. I didn't even think of that. All right, we have our round 3 recap. Any standouts to you right here?
I really like Azu. That mon, I think, 1v1s a lot of the top tiers on its own. So really great pickup by Jay Ricky. Overall, this was kind of the glue round of the draft, just picking up your bulk and just pairing that with your offense. So I really like a lot of the picks here.
I'm definitely partial. I think the Hisuian Samurott, the Hammerot, was very, very solid for JV. I like that Pokemon a lot, and I think getting round 3 for the price point it's at is going to be really good for him. So very, very good stuff. We can jump into the next round. Why does it keep doing that? Okay, I don't know why it keeps doing that. I swear. Okay,
we're good.
Okay. It was quick. Don't look back, and you won't be spoiled. All right, we have Star with his round 4 and Alola Muck. Do you want to talk about Alola Muck?
Mm-hmm. Gotta call it Amok, right?
Amok, of course. That's Amok. Or Almuck. Either way works. But yeah, do you want to talk about Alola Muck for Star right here?
For sure. Okay, so with Amok, you basically got knockoff, and you have a really, really good Glumon just to pair alongside Skeledirge. Obviously, you maybe have a little bit of a ground weakness, but that being said, you got a Lando, and then you have an Omni-type Skeledirge that can just get in, get out, do what it needs to do. Amok just being able to knock off and being able to handle those very scary ghost types is very nice. Being able to even handle some of those very scary fairies is also kind of nice. Just slap an AV on this thing. This is like the de facto Lele check in a lot of like NatDex OU formats and stuff like that. Just when the fairies and the darks are running around, having this mon is really, really nice, especially with knockoff as such a rare commodity in this gen. Unfortunately, it doesn't get T-Spikes like its Kantoian counterpart, but that being said, very solid mon and a very rare dark type going round 4.
Oh, for sure. I really like it a lot. I think, again, the special defense with the physical defense on the Skeletor is really solid. Next up, we have me. I picked up Zarude right here. I wanted that strong offensive dark type. I really like Zarude a lot. I loved it last gen. Love it this gen. Lost Access to Darkest Lariat, which is definitely a tough nerf for it. So you kind of have to click Crunch now. Which Darkest Timeline where you have to click Crunch with Zarude. But regardless, it's a solid Ghost Pivot. It grabs me good momentum into my Spectre, into my Sneasler, things like that. It gives me a Psychic immunity. I can check Psychics now, which I kind of got 6-0 by a good calm-minding Psychic type up to this point, so that's really nice. Gives me that Ghost check, and it also gives me, again, that good offensive Dark type to really, really pair alongside well with that Fighting and Sneasler and that Ghost and Spectre. Solid speed tier as well. I believe it's 105 off the top of my head. I know it's around that 100 mark. I think it's 105 for
105.
Zarude. It also got access to Swords Dance and Trailblaze this gen. So Trailblaze also isn't the weakest thing on Zarude, making it, obviously be stab. And Swords Dance allowing it to boost its attack a little bit faster than Bulk Up. I think the SD variants of Zarude are going to be very good this generation. In conjunction with its dual stats plus close combat and rock slide. Very solid Pokemon nonetheless. I like a lot. And Jungle Healing on like Bulk Up Stall Breaker sets, which is obviously really good. Having a way to get rid of status is always a good time.
Up next, we have the Terra Captain for the San Antonio Sparks. We got Thunderous Eye, and just being able to turn into whatever type you want is going to be so nice for this team offensively. You can obviously run Electric for those moments where you just really need some heavy hitting offense. You can run Ice potentially for those ground types. I would say flying on a lot of these genies can also be really, really cool because none of them really have access to reliable flying moves. So just being able to have that versatility is really, really nice. Considering what I know next, just having a Terra type on a mon that is flying also is very freeing for this team, considering that he might be picking up another flying type sooner or later. But I think this mon is going to be very, very good offensively. Really hits that middle of the pack speed tier in terms of those really big threats, and it kind of means that Iron Treads can get a little bulkier too, which is nice as well. So good mon for Will.
Next up, we have another mascot pick. Second mascot pick of the draft. We have Slitherwing getting picked up by Brody here. Again, very good in Sun. Getting out photosynthesis either in your attack or your defense or whatever you might want to be is great. Great priority option for his team, so he has Sucker Punch plus First Impression, which is very solid. Bug and Fighting is a really good offensive and defensive typing. We've seen it time and time again with things like Heracross and Buzzwole. So Slitherwing, obviously, sharing that typing is going to be solid. It gets Flare Blitz, so you can boost in the sun. You can even go with like Photosynthesis bulk up sets with Acrobatics and things like that outside of Sun, or even just, bulk up in the sun and get your your photosynthesis boost and win games like that. You can Will-O-Wisp, Morning Sun, obviously U-Turn for momentum. This Pokemon is very versatile. I think people really sleep on how good this thing can be in a draft league format and in a draft league setting. It even gets Wild Charge for some reason to hit waters really hard. So this thing really does do a lot for this team. Great pivot, and it's going to get in that threat of Walking Wake all the easier. It also beats water resist that Walking Wake doesn't appreciate in grass types and things like that, which is awesome. So good pickup by Brody here.
Azelf is going to be the next pick for PackMac. Just a very nice passive ground immunity. It's not the flying type, but it doesn't, doesn't have to take on that role because you could just pair it with another flying type. And offensively, I feel like it's a little mini Gren. It can run a lot of special sets, and especially now that it gets mystical power, you can kind of pick stuff off in a similar way to how Battle Bond works. Get your special attack boost and keep rolling from there. You got a lot of very fun Life Orb sets. You got rocks as well. You can maybe run like Sash rocks with like maybe Nasty or something like that, just to make sure that you can deal a lot of damage. It gets Explosion too in this gen, or I guess retains it if I'm not mistaken. And this mon just hitting that speed tier is going to be very, very clutch for PackMac. Just getting a very good mon that can outspeed a lot of the rest of the game is going to be really nice, just to be able to revenge stuff and help it to where you don't have to run some, I guess, more wild sets or maybe more bulky sets to take on some of those more offensive opponents.
He does have 4 monsters that aren't set rocks. You're right, Emil. That's pretty crazy. Next up, we have Big Iron Hands. This is a Pokemon I would actually also love to see someone use Terra all on. I think this Pokemon is really, really good with Terra, but it's really solid nonetheless. Whether it be Assault Vest sets, physically defensive sets, Swords Dance variants. I think like Swords Dance Shuka sets are great. Even Swords Dance Weakness Policy sets can be ridiculously threatening, alongside Drain Punch or Close Combat, then all of the Elemental Punches as well, Earthquake, things like that. Electric Fighting is such a potent offensive typing, alongside very solid bulk. This Pokemon is very difficult for a lot of teams to deal with. Really annoying to switch around, and really annoying to Oko, so a pretty solid pickup here from Dashing.
For sure. Jay did not want to pick up this mon, but this is the fairy of the team. Obviously, I was saying, Hamra is going to be the offensive mon to kind of alleviate Great Tusk and Zapdos. Screamtail is going to be that defensive mon. And once you get past, I guess, what it looks like and how it is, it's actually kind of interesting. Just getting a lot of nice support and being very, very bulky, especially at that speed, is very unique. It's a very unique trait for Screamtail. And also just being able to make use of Sun is going to be really nice as well. So I'm really interested to see how this mon acts in the team, but it does kind of, again, alleviate some of the roll pressure from Great Tusk and Zapdos in a similar way that Samurott does it offensively.
100%. Next up, we have Klefki. All the fairies are gone at this point. All the steel types are gone at this point. We're getting Klefki to kind of, really get rid of all of those guys at this point. Another Spiker, which is really interesting. So more Spikes options really frees up Glamour, potentially to be a little bit more offensive if you want it to in a week. It also gets access to dual screens, which can be really obnoxious with Ursaluna, making to where instead of guaranteeing a 1-for-1, you're guaranteeing a 2-for-1 potentially with that. So really solid aspect here of that Klefki. It also gives that fairy, gives it steel type, lots of roll compression. Roll compression is really important, especially when you drafted the top half of your team in the way that Bruno did here, and since that he didn't grab a lot of traditional typings early on, so a lot of those traditional typings are gone. So getting a Pokemon that can kind of glue into both of those slots is going to be really solid for him. So good stuff here for Bruno.
Just like the fairies were going and the steel types were going with Klefki, Gudra is up next. This was originally a Scizor Gudra Steel core, which is very interesting. But Gudra at 12 points, I think, is worth the pickup. It is a very interesting Pokemon with a lot of versatility, being able to boost defenses, never dying. It just takes like 2 or 3 hits, unless it is a Stab EQ or a Stab CC is very, very nice. And being able to throw off a lot of special just attacks and retaliation, I think, is really nice as well. A very good glue to the team that isn't Fortress, that actually has a little bit of venom to its offenses, is going to be very helpful for Q.
Oh, 100%. Definitely a really cool Pokemon, too. The Double Dragon is also really cool. I like the overwhelming, like, the overload principle of that, potentially. Next up, we have Volcarona for John. So, remember earlier I said, man, I think Zone really functions well in balance. John decided to go hyper offense as hell so far. We have Volcarona, which isn't going to be a Terra Captain because it is banned from tearing, but still a really solid Pokemon. Volk was never a bad Pokemon before it could Terra, obviously, guys. It was still a top tier threat, a massive threat, in fact. So getting this thing to set up and Quiver Dance up and win gives John that win con potential, which he didn't really have up to this point right now. It also can do some different things like U-turn around, Will-O-Wisp and things, burns and things. So definitely a really good Pokemon. I'm really interested to see how John's team glues and meshes together, because right now it is a little bit discombobulated at this point, in my opinion. It's just a lot of Pokemon that he really likes. So I'm interested to see how he ends up rounding this one out. I'm sure he'll figure it out, though.
Surely one of them has to work, right?
Yeah, of course.
Up next, we got Tiro with Dragalge. I think this was a little bit early when there were a lot of fairies that were still on the board that were kind of dwindling, but just having access to another Bulkymon is very nice, and having access to T-Spikes is also very nice, especially when you want to just pick stuff off with Cinderace or Iron Bundle. It can be very, very useful. It does not have Flip Turn, as I recall, which is very unfortunate. Just being able to pair that with Core of Night would be very nice, just to get in and get out. That could be very cool. But don't sleep on its offenses. Just having adaptability and being able to fire off a lot of stabs is really nice, especially when the switch-in is a Steel type, which you have Core of Night for, you have Cinderace for, you have Iron Bundle for, and getting up T-Spikes is also a plus as well. So pretty good mon, maybe a little early, but it is what it is.
Next up, we have Grimmsnarl here for mid. Grabbing the dual screens option alongside the Spathra and the Chien-Pao, as well as more momentum to get into those big threats with Prankster Parting Shot, which is a great addition to this thing's move pool, really allowing it to function as a solid pivot alongside that screen setter. It can also do cool things like bulk up rest sets. I think I really saw, whether it be Resto Chesto or Rest Talk. Again, with that Prankster priority making it great, it gets Thunder Wave for speed control in that regard as well. It can also Sucker Punch for priority. So Grimmsnarl, it does a lot. It's not a Pokemon I'm personally super big on, but I think it fits his team very well in getting up those dual screens for those top two to really pop off and do well. And I know that mid is pretty comfortable playing like screens hyper offense, and that's kind of what this team is shaping up to be at this point. So definitely a good pick from mid here.
Up next, we got Hammer Rock. This is the second version. You got Cleavor. It is, I think, very awesome offensively, just getting up rocks with every single hit, at least like some of the time, most of the time. But when it hits, it is going to be a phenomenal mon. Very solid offensive pivot, just being able to put a lot of pressure on opponents and just get in, get out, back out into Slowking, and Slowking can obviously get in and get out into Pult or into your Shifu. So you have a lot of offensive synergy here, and getting up rocks is nice. Obviously, he doesn't have a rocker so far, just T-Spikes. And so up next, he should probably pick maybe a more reliable rocker, but very solid offense overall.
Oh yeah, definitely. Next up, we have Mew. Again, how the mighty have fallen. It's still a great Pokemon, right? But Mew did lose access to Roost, which I think is a really, or any reliable recovery outside of Rest. And I wouldn't consider Rest super reliable. Losing access to any recovery is pretty tough for Mew, because I personally think Mew's shown in a more defensive light, running those Stall Breaker sets and Taunting and Will-O-Wisp and Super Fang, where it did lose a lot of those tools this generation, as well as some high base power moves. I believe it lost like Flare Blitz, obviously Triple Axle and Poltergeist are gone, making those DD physical sets a little bit worse. But Mew is still incredible. It's still a very, very good Pokemon. It can still set up, with a bunch of options. It can still set up a bunch of hazards. It can still, win games on its own. And then those, like, Cosmic Power rest sets are still very potent defensively and can be very obnoxious. It's a very, very versatile Pokemon. I think it is going to function much more offensively this generation, but it's still going to be very good. Worse, but very, very good. Life Dew does not count, Amel. You better be careful saying that in my chat. But Mew still definitely can do some really fun things, and it's just going to function a little bit differently this gen in a more offensive light, at the very least. All right, next up we have Thomas's Terra Captain and Thundy T.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how this goes. Just having access again to a very solid array of Terra options is really nice for Thundurus. Being able to use Terra Electric, being able to use Terra Flying finally, being able to use Terra Ice is also really nice. Although this mon does have a very, very impressive special attack stat. I think it's 135, if I'm not mistaken, to pair with 101 speed. But it has options with Grass Knot, Volt Switch, U-Turn, so it can really get in, get out, aside from just its main stab, and then maybe like Focus Blast or something like that to hit a bulkier steel type. But this mon is going to be very versatile, again, getting in and getting out. A lot of special attackers on this team, I will say, so just pairing this with maybe some more physical offense, I think is what Thomas should look for in the next one.
For sure. Next up, we have a mess up and a slide from Brody. I didn't notice it when I was putting them together. I could look up and see his actual round 4 pick was 10 points, and it was Noivern. I wonder if it is going to be Muck the rest of the rounds. We'll see in the next round. But he actually ended up grabbing Noivern. I was like, wait a minute. He does not have Muck. But it's going to be Noivern here, which gives Jay Ricky a very, very good speed tier on his team. Obviously being really, really fast, grabbing U-turns, having access to Defog as well, so giving him a Defog, which has been very, very short supply this gen. And again, better offensively because there's less steals and there's less fairies, which means dragons go crazy this gen. So solid pickup, gives him that, typical Dragon Fairy Steel core. So Draft League fans from 2017 are cheering and hurrahing because he finally got the core that you have to get to have a good Draft League team. But again, very solid Pokemon. I love me some Noivern. I think it's a very good Pokemon. So good stuff from Jay Ricky. All right, here we go. Look, there's the Noivern. I told you guys. I don't remember drafting this. You didn't. Don't worry. I hope you didn't plan to bring Noivern to week 1 because you're getting forfeited. Is there any standouts here to you?
I feel like Mew has the most upside, but I'm taking a bit of a risk on it. Maybe, it's not great. Maybe it doesn't fit the team. But I do like Zarude. I do remember recommending that. That is a very, very solid mon, and I've picked that up in one of my other drafts. So I'm excited to see that pop off. Also, Iron Hands and Volcarona, I think, are going to be very scary as well.
Oh yeah, round 4 Iron Hands and Volcarona. It's pretty late to see them, so those are definitely really cool. I did not know that, Emil. Punching Glove, Urshifu loses Unseen Fist. So does it... Wait, so like when you use Punching Glove, you don't get the effects of Unseen Fist?
Yeah, so like Protect would work against Punching Glove.
Very, very interesting. Okay, let's go ahead, jump into the next one right here. Oh my gosh, we didn't have the recap slide. Let's go.
Let's go.
Okay, we have Hisuian Arcanine, which is actually going to be Jay Ricky's Terra Captain. I think this is the second latest Terra Captain left. Yeah, this is the second latest Terra Captain left, so everybody has their Terra Captain right now besides JV and obviously Jay Ricky, who just grabbed this Hisuian Arcanine. For 12 points, this is going to be a great, great wall breaker, especially when something like Urshifu gets at those switch-ins on those fairies, obviously gets in, resists those moves, and can throw off, ridiculously strong head smashes and flare blitz. I think Double Edge and E-Speed are a great option on this too. This is going to be another one of those Terra Normal mons that's very, very good. Again, Double Edge and E-Speed also becoming Stab alongside Stab, Flare Blitz, and Head Smash. It's going to be very scary for teams to deal with. It does have access to Intimidate as well, I think, right? It didn't lose Intim, it just gained Rockhead.
Yes,
correct?
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay, cool. So it still has that more defensive option. Obviously a much worse defensive typing, but definitely not unusable in that regards. 115 attack is very, very strong. It gets close combat as well. It gets Morning Sun. It can still Will-O-Wisp things, I believe. Right?
It should be able to,
if I'm not mistaken. You can still Will-O-Wisp if it's a rocker as well. So while you're typically going to be running this thing with a scarf or a band and just clicking a button with that Rockhead, you can do some other fun things, which is really cool. I think this is a really cool Terra Captain. I actually really want to try this Pokemon myself. I think it would be so much fun to use for a full season. And I think Terra is just going to up it to that next level and get you some great value out of that 12-point mon. And there really isn't anything else on his team outside of the band Urshifu that really wants Terra at this point. Maybe Goldango, but I think this was definitely the pick. And it looks like you have Muck the rest of the draft, at least besides the recap slide. So sorry about that, J-Rick. You have a Muck now. No more Noivern. Next up, we have Scizor here from Thomas.
Scizor was, again, originally a Fortress, but getting basically Scizor with a 5th round pick is insane. A physical attacker that is very, very reliable. It's very consistent in its damage output. Just being able to clean up games. SD maybe break a little bit as well is nice. and then also being able to U-turn, get in those more specially offensive attackers is really cool as well. It did lose access to Roost, which does suck. That is, I guess, why it is at 13 points, but everything that it does offensively is still there. So I'm very excited to see this mon pop off and just pick off some mons and clean some games up.
Very good Pokemon. Next up, we have Talonflame. Again, we were talking about speed being at a premium this gen, so Marcus ended up finally grabbing a little bit of that, upper echelon speed. That 115 plus speed tier, something faster than that, is going to be really clutch. Again, grabs momentum. We need some more momentum on this team because Draft League player loves clicking U-turn, so we're going to grab that. Gale Wings is also great anti-cheese. There were so many matchups in BBR last season where, I was like, oh no, I lose to this, but I have a Talonflame, so I could always, run up with a Gale Wing Strong Brave Bird and pick it off after I get a little bit chipped. So I love the anti-cheese and, the, priority in Gen 9. I think it is the most valuable it's ever been in the Draft League format right now, just because of the shenanigans that can occur. So definitely like the pickup there. Talonflame is just great low tier value, or I guess mid tier value. It's still at 10 points, but it does its job well. It's not going to come to every game, but when it does come, it's going to do really well. And obviously Swords Dance sets and bulk up sets are still really annoying. Heavy Duty Boots was the saving grace to this Pokemon from falling off the face of the earth, so definitely really good here.
Iron Jugulus is up next, and I think this mon is a little bit slept on. I used it in BBL, and it actually just can break through stuff really well offensively. It does have access to rocks, if I'm not mistaken, which is a little wild. I would not really use this as the rocker. But that being said, it hits that middle of the pack speed tier offensively, hitting, if I'm not mistaken, 108 or 106, one of those interesting Ultra Beast-esque tiers. But
I think it's 106. I think you're right. Hold on, let me see. Iron Jug 108, which is actually a really good speed tier. I like that a lot for this team.
Very, very nice. Yeah, being able to pick stuff off with Hurricane, Dark Pulse, U-turn as well is really, really nice. Again, maybe you have a little bit less of a spammable stab in flying over Dragon, but you do have access to booster energy, and you can run especially offensive or speedy jugs as well. So I am very, very impressed by this mon. It is a little bit slept on a lot of drafts, so I want to see Yobo use this mon very well. That's my challenge.
I like it a lot. I think it's really cool. And the more I look at it, I hated its design at first. The more I look at it, I think it's cool. I don't know. I like it. It's a good mon. Next up, we have Mid picking up Donphan. Not necessarily a mascot pick. I know you use the Donphan logo a lot of the time, but it's a great Pokemon. And again, a really, really solid roll compression mon. It gives him rocks, it gives him a ground type, and it gives him spin. All three things can be very difficult to come by this gen, in my opinion. I think the ground pool is actually pretty low. If the ground the pool of ground types in this deck was better, there's no ground resist in this deck either. It's a very unbalanced deck. The more I've played it, I've realized. But I really like Donphan for this team. Again, it gets in that removal, so he's not running boots on POW every single week. He can rock out with that Choice Band and that Life Orb because he can get a very reliable spin off. It's also a knockoff user, which there isn't a lot of this gen. So I like Donphan a lot this gen. I think it's probably one of the best gens it's ever had up to this point, just because of the roll compression, all of the things that it does offer to a team like this. And it really, really fits out on mid's team well. So good stuff for mid. Next up, we have Diancie.
Yes, Diancie. I'm very, very excited to see this mon pop off. We got rocks and spikes, which is really nice for a team like this. Just being able to add a little bit more offensive pressure later on in the game. You also got some really interesting moves like Iron Defense. You got Calm Mind. You got Trick Room. So it doesn't have to be that passive, but that being said, you do have to maybe have a little bit more time. With that said, though, very good supportive mon. And it is, it also has access to Encore and screens too. So it's really never going to be passive in any sense. It can always do something. And I think it's just up to Tiro to really build a solid glue set for this. Just being able to maybe mitigate setup, get up some hazards, and then get in those big mons in the back. That's kind of all you need with Diancie. And again, fairies, I think we're maybe 3 left at this point in the draft, maybe 4. So really, really solid pickup for T-Row.
Oh yeah, no, definitely one of the only. There's 3 fairies left, and this is the only good one. So good pickup here. Next up, we have John, kind of picking up a little bit more of that defensive backbone, getting a ground type in Hippowdon. He didn't have any stealth rock up to this point. His steel type didn't rocks. He really needed rocks. And again, just a very bulky Pokemon. I get it doesn't really mesh with the offense in that middle portion. right there. And since the Hippo is a little bit of a momentum sucker, but it's very good at switching into things, being bulky, defensive, and annoying. And special defense is also super, what do you call it? Special defense is also super slept on. Especially defensive Hippo isn't 2-hit KO by a lot of special attackers unless they're clicking that super effective button. And very solid Pokemon. It's not a Pokemon that really needs to function on sand. It's actually a Pokemon I don't think you should draft sand offense around, just because it is a little bit of a momentum sucker. But the sand passive chip is going to be really nice and more like whittling down other things. You can whirlwind things around. You can yawn them to stop them from setting up. So it's going to be a nice, cushion for the rest of the team right now. So very solid.
Up next, we have Quaquaval, and I think Hugh at this point was a little bit worried about his team just picking up just a lot of offense, not a whole lot of bulk. But at this point, what are you going to do? Quaquaval at 15 was kind of the only mon that was up there in terms of quality and price, and so he just picked it up. I think this mon is such a cool mon, very good threat in the early game with SD and bulk up, and you also have Rapid Spin. But my favorite set is like Banded Aqua Step in the late game. Just pick everything off, and you have really good mons to break. Banded Backs has no switch-ins. Specs and Amorous also has no switch-ins. So just being able to break with those mons and potentially clean up is nice. And you also have the option of breaking with Quaquaval and sweeping with the others.
Oh, 100%. Best snowball mon in the game right now, too. It just absolutely gets out of hand so fast with Aqua Step plus Moxie. Then we have Miss Magius here from Bruno. Very early Miss Magius, but he really wanted it. Very solid Pokemon nonetheless. It gets great coverage, great special bulk. It can spread status with Will-O-Wisp and Thunder Wave. It can Destiny Bond things. I'm trying to figure out exactly. I mean, it does give him a fighting immunity, which is solid. I think his team is a little bit fighting weak, and it kind of falls all on Torn. But if Torn is going to be tearing, Miss Magius doesn't have the most physical defense, and Klefki doesn't resist it, neither does Glim. It can be a little bit tough for those fighting moves coming Ursaluna's way, potentially, so we'll see how he ends up kind of patching that and dealing with that later. But Miss Magius is a great pivot. It's a great spin blocker as well, so that might be another great reason to grab it. Not a lot of the spinners in this metagame are going to be able to spin on Miss Magius or threaten Miss Magius much. And it's a Pokemon that's immune to Great Test Dual Stabs, which kind of sticks out this team right now. So that's obviously a really cool aspect of it. And definitely pretty good here for, Bruno here. Next up, we have JV.
Yes, as you can see, speed was the luxury because picking up Salazzle at this point in the draft was a little bit of a cope move, in my opinion. We were talking it over, and I think Salazzle just was a nice balance between the speed and the offense, which I enjoyed. But just having access to T-Spikes is going to be really nice, especially when you're going to be able to spike stack with Samurott. There isn't really a moment where a mon can come in and defog unless it's on like a Scream Tail very reliably, because you have a lot of pivoting moves. You have Samurott, which can just get more hazards up and chip on something that wants to get rid of T-Spikes. So Salazzle here I think is very nice just to be able to pressure a lot of mons, whittle stuff down. You obviously have the very annoying sub Willow or sub Toxic sets with Protect and whatnot. Just being able to get rid of a mon almost entirely or force them to run a very specific set is also very nice too for Salazzle. So, the speed is there. It's, I would say, a little early, but again, speed's the luxury, guys. It's Gen 9. It's a new meta, new game.
You gotta grab it. Yeah, no, that's totally fair. Sometimes I feel like in this minute especially, you're forced to grab things a little bit earlier than you want just because of how things are distributed. Again, not a very balanced dex in my opinion. The more and more I see it, the more I kind of mix the Galar dex days. I feel like that dex is actually really balanced. Next up, we have Decidueye. Very solid Pokemon here for dashing. Again, he's going a lot lower end with his picks in this, like point value wise, not like quality of mon, but point value wise. Now I do love Decidueye. It gets access to U-turn. It kept Defog. It can Swords Dance and Nasty Plot. It has great priority and Shadow Sneak and Sucker Punch. Again, physical, special, whether it be offensive, defensive, especially defensive, it can be very solid in all of those regards. So it gives him a lot of rolls and a lot of good roll compression. It gives him a spin blocker if he decides to pick up a little bit more hazards later on. Or no, he has spikes, Grant. I'm totally forgetting Grant gets spikes. So between Grand spikes, T-spikes, and the rocks he now has that hazard removal, which is really solid. And he has something that really switches in and beats down bulky waters. Something like Iron Hands doesn't appreciate switching in on those waters a lot of time because of its mediocre special defense. So if you're not running that AV set, you don't really want to switch in on surfs and things like that. Whereas Decidueye has solid split def, switches in, and has recovery and roost and can beat those down. So I like that aspect to it. And again, securing it early if you feel like you don't have good replacements for it later on is definitely very fair from dashing here. So I understand the early Decidueye right here in round 5.
Up next, we have Florges, and this mon is an absolute fairy staple this gen. One of the best defensive fairies there. So I'm really surprised that it got this far in the draft. But that being said, it's got very good Spadef, has very good special attack, and I think Pixie Plate is actually it's an item now. It exists. So now you can run maybe a little bit more offensive. I remember using this mon and trying to come up with like some sets. And I was looking in like, oh, where's the item? You know, where's like Fairy Dust or Pixie Plate or whatever. Was it there? Now that it's here, I think that gives Florges a little more versatility. I think it does have very slept on offensive capabilities alongside Calm Mind.
Especially with so little steel types in the format.
Exactly. And the steel types that you do have, if they aren't strong, you can just go into Annihilate, boost that Rage Fist, and then do whatever else you want. Also, having Wish support for stuff like Heat Train, Garchomp, and Annihilate is also very, very nice. Being able to retain a healthy Annihilate with a boosted Rage Fist is going to be very scary for a lot of teams, so very cool pickup by Pat Mac.
Oh yeah, definitely great value. Next up, we have Clodsire. Brody needed some more hazards. He decided he also needed something to check waters with Water Absorb, also stop some anti-setup. Again, lots of hazards, grounded poison. Very, very obnoxious mod. I think Clodsire is a very good glue piece for a team like this, and especially that specially defensive wall in a sorts alongside Torkoal is very, very good, allowing it to pivot in a lot of the very special attackers that kind of cook this team right now. Really cool aspect to it. And again, it's very simple. Its thing is here to either be water immune or stop setup on this team and set up hazards, which is great. Again, takes also some pressure off Meowscarada and being that spiker, allowing it to go those choice band variants or, 4 attacks Meow and things like that a little bit more viably. So I like the Clodsire pickup for Brody. Good roll compression. I think roll compression is the name of the game in Generation 9.
Up next, we got the table itself, Enam. I'm very excited to see this mon. It has some very good setup possibilities, and it also has a very strong special attack stat. Just being able to fire off Moonblasts, Earth Powers, whatever you need, it is very nice. I think it's a little bit redundant when you have a Thundy, but considering that the Thundy can Terra into whatever type, having a reliable flying is also very, very nice too. And obviously having that fairy is also very, very helpful as well. Considering that I think there are genuinely like 3 fairies left before you get to like Wigglytuff and Dedenne. Just having this fairy is nice. Maybe a little bit of an overpay, but that's the price in this gen.
Oh yeah, 13. Jeez, I did not realize it was that expensive. Okay, next up we have me. I picked up Sandy Shocks. I need some spikes. Again, I think that the name of the game with my team personally, I talk about it in my draft analysis, is passive damage and chipping things down so Spectre and Sneasler can win. And that really is helped out a ton by Sandy Shocks, getting rocks and spikes. It's a great hazard stack mod, especially when you take into account that you can go booster energy, boost up that speed, and then guarantee you get up spikes and rocks pretty darn freely. Really solid. Electric and ground is also really good offensive typing. Really the only thing that checks that super reliably is going to be grasses, which I think my team demolishes right now between Zarude and especially Sneasler. So between Volt turning between those Pokemon, it's going to be very solid offensively and defensively. Again, passive chip is the name of the game. We have a lot of status that we can spread right now between Spectre and Sneasler, and now we have a bunch of hazards that we can set up with our Sandy Shock. So I personally really like this pick. I think it's a pretty solid pickup here. Next up, we have Hatterene to finish off the round.
Hatterene, very solid fairy. It's got that bulk that the fairies usually want, and I think Starfish's next couple of picks are going to be very solid individual mons that really shore up the team. Hatterene, obviously being one of them, is just going to be able to get in, maybe eject button out, maybe have Calm Mind some sets, maybe have Nuzzle. It can basically do a little bit of everything in terms of the physical side or the special side. Just being able to take hits and retaliate. It's going to be very, very useful just switching in and mitigating rocks as well, especially when you have something like Roaring Moon that maybe doesn't really want to get chipped a whole lot. You don't really have any defoggers because Lando lost it as well. So just having that option of magic bouncing hazards in such an immediate gen is very, very helpful for this team.
100%. All right, next we go on to the round recap. Now, while we're in the round recap, I'm going to ask you guys, do you guys have any standout picks this round or any favorite drafts thus far? Any teams that are really sticking out to you that you've been watching throughout and you're like, man, that team is crazy. For me, I really, really like Jay Ricky's team so far. I think it is very, very structurally sound. I love the speed tiers. I love the offense. I love the momentum. He just needs a little bit more hazard pressure, in my opinion, and his team is going to be super nasty. So I really, really like that squad. And obviously, I'm biased, and I really like mine. Do you have any teams that have stuck out, like, as a whole to you so far, Marcus?
I will say I am prepping for J. Ricky week 1, and oh boy, it is a little bit rough. Lots of options. It's going to be a very fun match. But aside from that, I kind of like Obo's team. Maybe again a little biased really with the Glow King. Maybe doesn't have the defensive glue that I would really want to pair with Glow King, but what you don't have in the defense, you just make up for an offense. And if that's your style, that's your flavor, go for it. You know, you do you. That's awesome.
100%. How's it going, Kaz? I like Brody's team a lot. Brody's team is pretty cool too. The Sun offense is very, very overwhelming so far. So I definitely like that a lot. Clement is coming up soon, of course, of course. Spoilers. I like Flores personally next to No Fairies. He makes it very good in the low tier. Oh, 100%. Yeah, we were talking about that. I would say my standout is Arcanine because he stole it from me. I remember that being pretty tough for you. If you just went a different... Yeah. Especially being that you traded away that round pick too, that probably stings even more. And especially knowing, oh, that's brutal, Thomas, because you could have just, like, not drafted Fortress yet because he had his Goldango. He was never taken 4. No. Thomas, that's brutal. That's on you, bro.
You gotta pick the pseudo wheel out. You know,
you gotta kind of like understand what he has and what he can take. Yeah, that's a tough one. That is a tough one, bro. That is a tough one. All right. That being said, let's go ahead and jump on into the next round, which is going to start off with Breloom on Star's team. You want to talk about Breloom?
Yes. Breloom is a very, very cool mon at 10 points, being able to spore, being able to mock punch in a metagame that really thrives with priority. It's going to be very helpful. And then having access to loaded dice, technician, bullet seed, I think is going to be really cool as well. Just being able to pick off a lot of mons. And if the steel type or the flying type does come in, you really do have those answers in the Skeledirge and the Lando T as well. At 10 points, I really think you cannot go wrong with this mon. Very good abilities, very solid movesets that got buffed in this gen.
And again, people sleep on that. It's not the bulkiest Pokemon in the world, but Grass Fighting is really solid and being a really good Edgequake resistance, which this team got cooked by that combination right now. I was just the Landorus without any recovery or any wish into it. So I like this pick a lot. I love Breloom. One of my favorite mons in draft. I think it's so slept on. Next up, we have me. I grabbed Uxie. Again, more momentum, more hazards. That was really it. Gave me a great pivot. I needed more rocks. I only had Sandy Shocks up to this point. And again, the name of the game is passive hazard chip and passive, status chip, and Uxie is going to be great at that. It did lose access to knockoff, which is huge. It's really, really unfortunate that it lost access to knockoff because it's stable on Uxie's moveset, but it can screens, it can memento, it can even rock out with cool Calm Mind sets, and I think Calm Mind Mystical Power is definitely something that I could see myself running going forward, if I do end up playing in a game where instead of Uxie is a little bit obnoxious and my opponent can't really deal with it. Maybe like a Calm Mind Rest Talk set against a No Dark type team. Who knows? I think the Uxie is definitely very solid though. And obviously as Uxie has pretty, easy switch-ins, but if I have spikes and rocks up and I click U-turn, again, that's just more chip for the rest of my team to do well and really pop off. So I don't know. I think the passive chip that Uxie provides this team is really going to help out in, setting up endgames with Spectrier, Sneasler, things of the like. Next up, we have Amoonguss.
Amoonguss. Yes, the regen core is here. We got Slowking Amoonguss. Low-key, I'm just looking at this team right now. It kind of does auto-lose to Iron Bundle, just right off the bat. But I'm really interested to see how Amoonguss fares. Just being able to get in and get out, and being able to not rely or depend on Slowking for taking a lot of those big hits is really unique as well. So just having a mon that can maybe alleviate some of that pressure is very, very nice. Also, having that Spore option is very cool as well. Just being able to help maybe Thundy set up, maybe if you really want Chi-Yu to nasty plot and just win the game from there, you can do that potentially as well. But just having access to Spore, Toxic, and some very annoying things in the back can be very, very useful for this team.
So, Kaz, typically when people make draft league teams, there are definitely people who have the same name as you. I've seen 8 million Miami Heat Trans and things like that. As for your logo, you typically get an artist to commission it. Usually, there's not too expensive when it comes to most artists in the community and things like that. You have someone commission a logo and it's yours. You can have the same team name as someone. Nobody's gonna be super upset about that. Probably should definitely don't take someone's logo though. That wouldn't be the nicest thing in the world. But there's definitely a lot of overlap and a lot of it's just coming up with cool things. Like I don't know. I really liked Roaring Moon, so I wanted a Roaring Moon logo, and I thought he would look cool in like the Carolina Hurricanes kind of style, so I did Carolina Roaring Moon. It doesn't have to be like super specific and stuff like that, but yeah, that being said, let's jump on to let's jump on to the next one. Okay, we're good. I was like, did I skip one? We have Gardevoir right here. Brody grabbing his fairy. I love Gardevoir offensively, right? I'm not the biggest fan of it defensively. I think it's a bit mediocre as a defensive fairy, but that psychic and fairy stab combination is lethal alongside mystical fire and focus us sun boosted mystical fires. By the way, it gets access to trick, it gets access to destiny bond, it gets access to healing wish, and I think healing wish is a really cool aspect of this Pokemon for this team, where you have those like blitz sun sweepers that typically can kind of get whittled down throughout the course of a game, and they might kind of trade one for one with their check, and then you can bring it back at full and really go to town with that walking wake, with that Slitherwing, with that even that Meowscarada, and win the game. It does keep access to teleport. It is a Gardevoir exclusive line, or like move now. Not going to typically use it very much. I don't think you want to use Gardevoir in a way that you're bringing in the force switches and get momentum out. You typically want to just attack where your opponent can't defend, because Gardevoir switch-ins a lot of the times don't have reliable recovery, so you might as well chip them down alongside your spikes and things like that. It's a great Pokemon offensively. I do worry about Brody's matchup into offensive dragons up to this point, though, because Gardevoir typically isn't the most reliable in checking those defensively, but, Assault Vest sets are very solid, and you can go with, like, Wish Protect sets. It's just, on that physically defensive side, you're gonna have a tough time against those Dragon Dancers, so you gotta be very careful about how you, position yourself offensively and things like that, or defensively.
Up next, we have Overquill. The Dark type is very, very useful in this team. Granted, you do have a Heatran, which can take a lot of those psychic hits, and you have Florges, which can basically hit or take any special hit, but just having Overquill that can do a little bit more on the physical side, and then also potentially get up spikes or T-spikes is very, very nice. Having that variety of hazards is going to be very useful for this team. Especially with T-spikes, just being able to whittle stuff down as maybe something like Annihilate or Garchomp set up is going to be very, very useful. And this one has some very good bulk. It has access to Swift Swim, so if you really want to run Rain one time, you could do that. I've used it, and personally, I've gotten a lot of use out of just being able to take a hit, being able to status something, or being able to get up a spike, and being done. And especially with Wish Healing from Florges, I think this mon's going to be a big nuisance.
Heck yeah, pretty cool. Definitely really like Overquill. I think it's actually my favorite Hisuiamon design, by the way, too. I love Overquill's design. I think it's very cheesy, and Overquill and Overkill, like, it's super corny. Love the design, though. Super sick mon. Next up, we have Douchbun in round 6. Very, very early Douchbun, but fairies are at a premium. We've been talking about these really, really tight roles that are very essential to a lot of draft league teams. They're just not in high demand or high quantity in Paldea decks.
Or quality.
Yeah, I mean, same thing, yeah, because I wouldn't say Douchbun is the best Pokemon in the world. Now, it is a fire immunity, and this team is pretty darn fire weak, which is nice. It does struggle beating a lot of those fire types. Like, I remember I saw someone tell me that, Douchbun is a Chi-Yu counter, but then I saw it take, like, 80% from Spec Psychic, and I was like, haha, no, it's not. It's a good Pokemon in the sense that it fills the roles that Dash needs for his team, and there's really not much else that he can get. So his hand was kind of forced. It is very early, though, and it is a very, very mediocre Pokemon at best. I know John did really well with it in BBR, though, so who knows? It could end up popping off and giving good value. It also does give good wish support for the team. Its HP stat is really low, though, so those wishes are really tiny. You might give Iron Hands back a Citrus Berry, basically, when you pass a wish into it, but, again, it fills the roles that he needs on his team right now, and getting that fairy, getting a fire immunity as well is really clutch, so I understand it to an extent.
Up next, we have Iron Leaves just trying to shore up more of that speed. And in a sense, like, it kind of creates a little mini core in terms of the fast mons with Salazzle and Iron Leaves. They really do kind of handle each other's weaknesses. So being able to bring one or both and just kind of tailoring that to whatever matchup you have is very, very useful. It does have access to Sword Stance and some pretty solid physical offense. You have Leaf Blade, you have Psyblade, if you really want to run Electric Terrain, but obviously Psyblade's just good on its own. CC and Wild Charge, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So some pretty decent coverage, just being able to break for something in the end game, or maybe getting a speed boost in some way, just being able to break or clean up that way is very, very useful as well. I think this mon is a little slept on, but at the end of the draft, like kind of at this stage, there aren't a lot of really high quality Pokemon, and there aren't a lot of like high quality speed tiers, and I think this is kind of a little bit of both. So I'm interested to see how this goes for Jay. A little bit unknown on this pick, but I want to see this mon pop off once or twice.
Oh, for sure. Definitely has the potential to. I think booster sets are really scary. Next up, we have Rotom Mow here for Bruno. I think this pick was very, very good for him because a bulky water type was not fun for his team to deal with at all. He now has that water pivot. He now has more momentum alongside that Torn T, which really that was the only momentum he had up to this point. And I think having that Volt Turn combination in a draft league setting is really nice when you have something like Ursaluna that really appreciates those free switch-ins to click a button. So Rotom is going to be very, very good at that. It does what it did in previous generations, just minus Toxic, Pain Split, and Defog like all the other Rotoms, but it's still very good at doing those things. It spreads Will-O-Wisp, it can even Thunderwave, it can Nasty Plot up, it can be a great Scarfer, and again, Electric plus Grass with that Levitate ability is a very solid defensive typing, so I'm definitely here for the Rotom. Very, very good Pokemon for sure.
Up next, we have Mesprit for Q, and Mesprit is a very solid, like, bulky Gloomon for this team in a team that really doesn't have it aside from maybe Fortress. Being able to get up rocks, being able to U-turns really nice, being able to set up nasty plots and mystical power is going to be very cool as well. Very versatile because its stats are basically even across the board, and at base 80, it's a fairly solid speed tier, just being able to round out the speed tiers further down for Q, where he's, I wouldn't say he's fleshed out the speed tiers further up, but he has a bit of a gap in the middle. It's also a ground immunity, where Enamorus really it is, but you don't really want to take the Stone Edge that's coming afterwards. So just having that Mesprit around is also very, very nice, just to get in, get out, and it can just add a little bit of versatility to this team, where a lot of the offense, you already know what's going to happen.
Exactly. So no, it is not possible to transfer Rotom with Defog from previous gens. If a Pokemon cannot learn the move in Scarlet and Violet, it gets reset upon being transferred in from Pokemon Home. It gets reset to just standard level up moveset and things like that. So there are no like additions to Move Pool and Home outside of Blissey and Chansey, which now can legally run Heal Bell because they didn't have a way of attaining it before, and now they do, and it doesn't change when you transfer it in. Other than that, move pools are exactly what you would see in Scarlet and Violet. There are no home transfer moves, unfortunately. I think this metagame would be so much more fun if it was, but no home transfer, unfortunately. Next up, we have John grabbing Dondozo. He really liked this thing in BBR. Very, very solid physical bulk. Very good anti-setup with Unaware. Can be very, very annoying to switch into. Curse sets are obviously obnoxious. I also think Assault Vest sets are pretty good, and John's team does struggle a little bit in the way of special defense, so I think grabbing that here with Dondozo is definitely really, really solid. It can spread Yawns. It has solid coverage in like Liquidation, Ice Fang, Body Press, Earthquake, Rock Slide. I think it gets Rock Slide. I'm pretty sure it gets Rock Slide or Stone Edge. So solid in that way. A bit passive at times in the way that it functions and its move pool is and the way that it plays. But it's definitely a good stopgap to that physical setup that can get, a little bit scary, at times and things like that. So very good Pokemon. Also water resist, which he didn't have water resist up to this point. So definitely really, really cool. Next up, we have Farigiraf.
Yep. Farigiraf is, I think, a little bit slept on at 7. It might overperform, but it is a very, very bulky Pokemon with 120, 70, 70 in terms of its HP and defenses. And I would say it has 3 fairly useful abilities. Sap Sipper is nice. Maybe it's not going to be used on this team because you do have a whole Corv and you also have Cinderace and Dragalge just in the back as well. But having Armor Tail, I think, is going to be pretty interesting. Just being able to mitigate that priority. It just functions like Serena. You show up and it's all good. You don't take any damage. So having an immunity to something that has gotten such a boost in Gen 9 just due to the shape of the meta is very, very useful. Having access to setup as well is very, very nice. And Wish support too. Cudchew, I think, is also a very interesting ability. And I am a man of the berries. I really like just being able to use some crazy plant and pop off with it. So just being able to do that twice is very fun as well.
Okay, definitely a lot of potential in this one. I haven't seen it drafted too often, but I think it's one of the better normals in the format, which is really cool. And again, this team really appreciates the Wish support. Things like Dragalge, Diancie in particular, love having Wishes passed into them, especially with that high HP stat. So good mon. Next up, we have Chestnut for mid. I like this pickup a lot. It gives him more hazards. He didn't have any spikes up to this point. He gets spikes here. He gets an Edgequake resistance, taking a little bit of pressure off of things like Dawn Fan and the Rotom. He can, chip things down with Leech Seed plus Spiky Shield, or you can even rock out with like Belly Drum sets, Bulk Up sets. This thing got access to Body Press and Close Combat this generation. Two great upgrades to its Fighting Stab. It even got Trailblaze too, so like boosting your speed when you Belly Drum is definitely a very viable option. I think Chestnut is definitely a really, really cool pickup and a really slept on this generation. It does a lot for this team, like a lot for this team. So a really, really cool pickup here for mid.
Up next, we have Toedscruel. You're basically getting a very fat mon that can also run a very fast set, potentially. It has some interesting coverage. It's a little hindered by Mycelium Might, just being able to, spore and then just reducing your speed to nothing is a little sad. But with that said, this mon is very interesting. And I think it fits the team really well, just being able to get up some hazards, get up a spore. If I'm not mistaken, it also gets knockoff, which is nice. And then from there, you can just whittle down the team a little bit. It does get knockoff, which is very, very cool. I feel like one thing about Toedscruel is that it gets forced to be brought to a lot of matches, especially in matches where you don't really want to use it, or you want to use something that's more immediate or a little less momentum sucking. And I think Toedscruel does have that aspect about it. But with that said, it does a couple things very, very well. And at 8 points, I think it's a very solid ground type to pick up.
Oh, 100%, 100%. I actually really like Toedscruel. I want to try it a lot. I love the spikes that it offers this team, too. Really like the spikes. Next up, we have Arboliva here for Marcus. I know Tiro used this recently, and when he drafted it, I made fun of him. I said, this mon sucks. Why the hell did you draft it? But I was actually pleasantly surprised when I saw him use it in practice. Really not that bad. I think the biggest hindrance to it is its secondary normal typing, which ends up kind of hurting it more than it ends up helping it. I think as a pure grass type, it's a little bit better. But Seed Sower, allowing it to set up grassy terrain, is great for Pokemon like King Gambit and even Palafin for passive recovery. It actually gets really solid coverage, and obviously gets dual 7 like Hyper Voice, Giga Drain, Leaf Storm, but also Dazzling Gleam and Earth Power. It can Leech Seed. It's a very, very annoying and obnoxious Pokemon, and really supports teammates well for its price point. Gives Marcus a ground resist. Up to this point, he did not have one. He had an immunity, or he had 2 immunities, but having a ground resist is always a very important thing to have, especially when your ground immunities are a little bit more offensive and things like Talonflame that just full dual Rock Slide or Stone Edge. So I was actually pleasantly surprised by Arboliva, and I think it fits this team really well. And I'm definitely no Arboliva hater anymore like I was in the past. Definitely a really, really cool team.
Up next, we have Serena. Just being able to get rid of hazards is really, really nice. This is a mon that I was considering alongside Arboliva, but I kind of like the support a little more. Serena, you get, on the flip side, a little bit more offensive presence on the physical side. You get U-turn as well, and then you also get to block priority, which is really, really cool in this meta. At 7 points, I think it is really, really cheap.
Yeah.
It lost a little bit of its coverage, but with that said, you still get a great rapid spinner, priority immunity, and U-turning, so you always get to keep that momentum up. I think this mon is a steal at this point range.
Oh, 100%. And it lost Axel, but it got Ice Spinner. It really only lost Knock if you look at the grand scheme of things, and Aromatherapy. But really good mon. I'm a big Serena advocate. Next up, we have Wo Chien. Ground resist, finally. His team is a little bit ground weak up to this point. Muck isn't there again. That is annoying for and I have to remind people. But regardless, he's still very, very ground based. So I actually really like the Wo Chien pickup. This thing spreads good knockoffs as well. It's double dark, but double dark really isn't a bad thing. And Wo Chien isn't functioning as an offensive dark anyways. It is forcing things in. It's getting knockoffs, removing items, and it's whittling things down with Ruination. Again, if that Fairy type wants to come in on your Wo Chien to beat it 1v1, then you Ruination it. It gets down to half health. Then it's 2-hit KO by Wicked Blow, whether you're Scarf, Band, or whatever you want to be on your Urshifu. So I actually really like the pairing with Urshi. Again, a very, very annoying Pokemon. Very, very solid pivot into a lot of things. And that Bug weakness and that Fire weakness is very well covered by the rest of this team. That Flying weakness is very well covered by the rest of the team. Really, the Ice weakness is pretty solid. Pretty well covered by the rest of the team too. So there's a lot, everything that Wo Chien doesn't appreciate defensively when it comes to all that super effective coverage that can hit it. This team covers it really well. So I think this is actually one of the best Wo Chien, teams that it can probably be on, and you get to scream out Wo Chien every time too. Exactly, Ricky. So what a great pickup there. All right, here we go. Round recap. Any standouts to you? For me personally, I really like the Overquill pickup earlier on. I think that mon's really cool. And again, it might be biased because I just think it looks so cool. But I really like that mon. I like the Toad School and Obo's team a lot, and I like the Wo-Chan. What about you?
Something that is just standing out to me is that there are 9 grass types in this round alone.
You're right. Oh my goodness. Holy.
There's so many.
Everybody said I need my ground resist now. Holy.
They picked it up right off the bat, and I think Arboliva, at least personally for me, was just a little bit of an early pick, but because I had 2 options between fairies and Jay, Ricky, and Thomas got his, I just decided, you know what? Let's get Arboliva. I'm a believer in this mon for sure. I think this mon's gonna pop off.
Arboliva and Armbelieva, good stuff. I mean, it brought T-Row to a BBR D-League championship. It came to so many games too and did so well. So that was definitely a really cool aspect of it. I'm definitely here for Arboliva. All right, next up we have Jay Ricky here picking up some hazards, which I think is so clutch for his team. Getting Gastron. I think Gastron getting spikes and rocks too is like, it's saving grace this gen. Gastron with no scalds would have been so terrible. But getting access to spikes and rocks really kind of saves this thing. And I really like that aspect. Setting up spikes and rocks for things like the Urshifu, Goldango, Azu, Noivern, Arcanine is going to be so unbelievably clutch. Pokemon like Wo-Chan are going to knock off Boots as well, forcing in flying types to get the knockoff. Now they're taking Rock's Chip and they're going to get blown up by Wicked Blow. I think this Pokemon fits very, very well. It's okay having a secondary water as well, because he has the Azu as the more traditional, like, ice resist type water. Whereas Gastron can take a little bit of pressure off of Azu defensively, and Gastron can come in and take those fire hits and take, on the more traditional things that waters take on, especially with access to recovery. I like the Gastro pick a lot. I know it's double water, but I'm a big double water advocate too. So this is a great pickup for Jay Ricky in my opinion. So good stuff.
You will hear no disagreements from me. Double water is it's the way. It's awesome. With this pick, we got Haxorus. I think more of a traditional, physically offensive Pokemon. You have Scizor and Haxorus now, which is really, really insane just to deal with from a physically defensive side. Access to Dragon Dance is obviously very, very cool. Unless you have an unaware mon, this mon will be breaking through something, and you're just going to have to deal with it offensively, just coming in and revenging. With that said, though, great coverage. I also really like Mirror Herb, just being able to switch into something that is setting up, and now you are the threat in the 1v1. I really like this mon.
More Mirror Herb lately too. I think it's a tech that's finally being explored more, which is really cool.
For sure. I'm really excited. I mean, for the coaches in chat, all it takes is just a little bit of confidence. You're just like, I know they're going to bring this. I'm just going to switch it in. That's all that's stopping you. That's it.
I think
very cool mon Haxorus.
In D-League, I saw T-Row brought, he was playing Ant, it's whatever, and Ant had a Dragonite. He switched in his Annihilate hard in on the Dragonite as it Terra Flying and DD'd, got the Mirror Herb up, so he got a Dragon Dance himself, and then encored the D-Knight, because he crept the D-Knight.
That's what I did!
It was super cool. Oh, did you? It's super, so I don't know if you got inspired, I don't know. It was super cool. It was a really cool tech. So I like seeing cool stuff like that with Mirror, because at first I was like, damn, this item is ass, but I've been seeing it a lot more lately, so it's really cool. Next up, we have Tinkaton. I get a lot of shit for this. I think Tinkaton sucks. I'm not the biggest Tink guy in the world, but again, we've talked about this fairy, the lack of fairy types in this metagame, and I think Marcus's hand was kind of forced when it came to the fairy that he had to draft right here. Now, it is a very reliable rocker, gets up rocks pretty well. It's just a little bit passive offensively, which is crazy with that big-ass hammer and its great dual stab combination. It just kind of lacks the coverage and the offensive power to really break through things. Now, it has a great speed tier. Thunderwave, I believe it gets Encore as well. I'm pretty sure it gets Encore, which is a really solid tool for a Pokemon like this with such a good defensive typing. And it's going to be a great pivot, and it's going to set up hazards and, function in the way it needs to. And I think its price point is very apt and where it should be. So, very good defensive typing. It just falls flat a little bit in, its survivability, considering that it doesn't have the best offenses in the world. But definitely a solid mon none the least, for sure. Next up... go ahead.
So sorry. Basically, this was the last fairy before Wigglytuff, and so I basically had the choice, and I was deciding whether or not Obo got Tinkaton or Mimikyu. I would say Tinkaton was a little nicer, but yeah, no, it's
I
missing
mean,
a lot
you
of
said
offensive
he
stuff.
said you sniped him right before his pick, and you definitely
Yeah.
sniped him right before his pick. So
Yeah.
that's definitely fair. How's it going, Zach? Welcome to stream. Oh, now you're spreading misinformation. I don't know, man. Tink is kind of duty. I don't know. I think it's John that like adamantly disagrees and thinks Tink is good, but it's bad. Okay, next up we have Obo's fairy type, which is going to be Mimikyu. It's a fairy type of all time. Do you want to talk about Mimikyu?
For sure. It is a fairy type of all time in the sense that it really doesn't do anything that a fairy traditionally does. It kind of sits there, takes a hit, maybe SDs. You can get pretty creative with it. It has some pretty cool status moves just being a ghost type. It has access to some really funky stuff that you can use. But with that said, Mimikyu isn't really a fairy in any sense. But either way, it's still a very good mon. Just being able to deal with stuff offensively. If there's a sweeper that is in front of you, all you gotta do is switch into the Mimikyu after something dies, revenge it, and you're good. So it does what it does very well. Doesn't really do anything defensively, but it is what it is. I mean, Obo already clearly has a theme. It is offense and then Glow King. So that's kind of all you really need.
Yeah, pivot in, get some hazards, you turn around, chip some things down. That is definitely the plan here. So not the worst pick on the team. Next up, we have mid grabbing Cyclozar. I know this was a big snipe for John. John wanted this next. Gives him some more regen, or not some more regen. Gives him some more rapid spins. Sorry. So more ways of removing hazards outside of Donphan. It also gives him a ghost immunity. Grimmsnarl isn't the most reliable ghost resist, and to be honest, Cyclozar isn't the most reliable ghost immunity, but it can pivot around. It spreads knockoffs. It's very obnoxious. I've honestly seen pretty offensive Cyclozars do okay with like Draco Overheat. It's just good coverage alongside like an eject pack or something like that to grab pretty immediate momentum and then be able to deal with things from there. It can shift gear up. It actually has some pretty solid coverage on the physical side as well as Overheat from that special side. It's a bit lackluster in its stats, but that speed tier is really nice. It kind of bridges the gap a little bit between his team. He does have a big jump right now and like Cyclozar Chen Pao at the top, and then it goes all the way down to a Spathra, which is going to be speed boosting anyways, and then a lot of slower and faster stuff. So I'm not 100% sure on the pickup here. I don't think he necessarily needed this unless he was very scared of Scarf and Spec Shadow Ball, and there's no other normals that he liked, which if that's the case, that's fair, because they're really at a premium this generation. There's not a lot of good ones. There's no Licky Lickies, unfortunately, running around, so
No.
there is Cyclozar for sure. Next up, we have Heracross.
Yes, I'm very excited for Heracross to pop off. I think in this gen, just being able to switch into a Heracross and just see zero resists on the other side is going to be so satisfying for Tiro, especially when you have a lot of the really fast offense. Just kind of bringing it back a little bit, going for a stronger option that's a little bit slower is going to be very, very nice as well. Just being able to fire off Guts, CCs, Facades. I think it does get access to Trailblaze as well. So if you really do want to set up and just get your speed up, it's there too. It also has access to Moxie, which is very, very cool. Just Scarf and Endgame. If you really want to break with Cinderace and Iron Bundle in the early game. Having Spikes as well is very, very cool as well. You know, just being able to get up a layer as the true pivot comes in, scat a little bit, see what their game plan is, and you can just go right back out into Corviknight. I think it's a cool option.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I'm a big Heracross fan. I love the physical breaking that it gives this team too, as it kind of lacked that. And again, whether it be Guts, Moxie sets, really strong mon. Next up, we have Colossal here from John. John needed some removal. He had none of it. I think Colossal's actually, for a 4-point Pokemon, very, very solid value. I love that it rocks, it spikes, it spins, it spreads burns with like Lava Plume or Flame Body. Steam Engine isn't the most applicable thing in a singles metagame, and it is very obviously ground weak and water weak, but I think John has solid resistances and checks to grounds. Not resistance, actually he doesn't have a ground resist, but he has two Pokemon that typically take on offensive grounds very well in Hippo and Dondozo, and same thing with Fires as well, or what do you call it, waters as well, and things like that. So definitely a solid Pokemon nonetheless for its, you know, price point. And I know John was just kind of running low on options when it came to Rapid Spin and Spikes. I think it's going to be a Pokemon that actually comes a lot more than you would typically see it end up coming to a lot of draft league games. So Colossal's definitely a very solid Pokemon. I like it a lot. I know some people are a little bit iffy, but I think for low tier value, it's about as good as you can get. Next up, we have Torn Eye. All the genies.
Oh boy, all the genies indeed. Torn Eye, you know, as we were saying, speed definitely was a priority in this draft, and Torn Eye just ending up at this spot was kind of the only fast mon with this kind of quality, so Q had to pick it up. He does have a fair pair of rock resists in the Gudra and in the Quaquaval as well. And Fortress can take a hit or two, but I do see the rock resist starting to stack up a little bit. And it's not the fastest Pokemon, just hitting 10 or not 101, 111. But with that said, it does get some funky stuff. It gets Prankster Tailwind, which could be nice. Just die and then bring in Bandit Backs or something like that. And then, what's your switch in at that point? It also has access to Nasty Plot, so it can sit up and do its own thing, which is very nice as well. And just being able to get in and get out is useful as well. I wouldn't say it's a mon that really fits the team, but just hitting that speed tier is nice, and that's clearly what Q was looking at.
Oh, 100%. Again, very solid offensive. I've used Tornai a few times. It's definitely a slept on mon, so good stuff. Next up, we have Slowbro. Draft League player, loves regen. I like this pick a lot. If this thing kept its Gen 8 move pool, this should be such a nasty pick with Ursaluna keeping access to teleport. I think that he probably really wanted a Slow Twin, which both went very early as they're much better this generation, so that you could Trick Room plus Chilly Reception into the Ursaluna, but this still is Trick Room into Ursaluna, which is very, very solid. And typically the moves that are coming Slowbro's way aren't hurting Ursaluna very much outside of like grass coverage and things like that, which honestly isn't the most common thing in the world in draft. You're typically not going to see a lot of really scary grass types. Plus you have Torn and things like that. You could potentially pivot around and do things like that. So I love the Trick Room aspect into Ursaluna, so it can come in and click a damn button. I also really like the regen aspect. I love the physically defensive nature of this Pokemon. A lot of the Pokemon on his team right now are very specially bulky and things like that. Regen is the best ability in the game, and Slowbro has it. Obviously, losing access to Toxic, Scald, and Teleport is really big for Slowbro, but it's still very good, and I think people kind of shit on a little bit too much. I still think it's very, very good nonetheless. So I really, and especially on this team, I think it's a great pickup here for Bruno. Next up, we have Magnezone.
Magnezone, yes. Steel types, again, were very, very limited, and picking up Magnezone at this point in the draft is very nice. Very usable offensively and defensively, and being able to trap steals or potentially force a steel type to run Shed Tail is very, very useful. It is, I would say, a little maybe slow for a mon that is offensive as you want it, but just having that steel option is very, very nice, and having an electric type that doesn't share that ground resist with Zapdos, or that ground weakness with Zapdos, I think is a nice pairing. Obviously, you worry about double types, double weaknesses, but, Magnezone and Zapdos have exclusive weaknesses, and they can actually cover for each other very, very well. So, honestly, bring both of them to a team that is weak to electric could be very, very useful, and you have some decent ground options in Zapdos coming in Iron Leaves coming in Great Tusk even coming in, and just being able to click a button is very, very nice as well. So I think Magnezone's pretty solid at 9 points.
This is the best team right here. Look at the Iron Leaves. True. Big Iron Leaves. Next up, we have Staraptor here for dashing. I like the speed tier that it offers this team, actually. That 100 speed tier. There's a big gap. Kind of, we had 110, 120. Is it 122 for Grand? I think it's 122 because it's one faster than Torn, right? 122, 110, and then it kind of falls off pretty immensely. So having that nice middle ground in Staraptor at 100 is very nice. Very solid Scarfer as well. This team didn't have good Scarf options at this point. I like the flying on the normal stab, obviously plus close combat. This Pokemon doesn't have great switch-ins. Final Gambit is always an option, and it can U-turn around, intimidate things if you need it to as well. It did lose access to Roost this generation, which I think is crazy to take Roost away from Staraptor. He's never allowed to land again. He has to keep flying until he dies. I think it is really wild for it to lose that move, and kind of tough because Staraptor could pull off some bulkier sets and things like that with access to Intim and heavy-duty boots. So a little bit tough to its versatility, but definitely very, very solid. Fido is like base 90, but that doesn't count as a real speed tier because I'm not creeping, what do you call it? Douchfun. See, it's such a bad Pokemon, you didn't even call it the right name because you forgot its name. That thing sucks. Next up, we have Kilowattrel here for Pat Mac.
Oh boy, Baby Zap. It is an interesting pickup. Obviously, for the speed tier, I think it's pretty decent. But with that said, I do have a couple nitpicks about it. Usually, I've seen it with a Terra type, so it's very nice just to be able to handle the grounds. But as the ground switch-in, it's not that great because you're just going to be hitting it with the T-Bolt, and obviously T-Bolt does jack shit. And so just being able to have Kilowattrel exist in U-turn is nice. Luckily, you do have Azelf in the back, but I would say I would have picked up maybe a flying type that can handle ground types a little better. But again, speed is important, and it looks like Pat Mac is going to be picking up a ground resist a little later in the draft. So hopefully that all works together.
More momentum. It's so good. I love that. We have a lot of John Jr. stands in the chat. Next up, speaking of Pokemon that we love the Dunsparce. This is new Licky Licky. What a good Pokemon. Great rocker for Brody's team. Again, right now, he really only had Claude as like a great rocker. I know Torkoal can set up rocks, and it's pretty solid at it. I'm not the biggest fan of Torkoal in really any sense other than setting up weather and switching out. So I think getting that to Dunsparce right here as a solid rocker, spreading glares and getting things paired, being a Coil or Calm Mind is great. Serene Grace is a really obnoxious ability. Obviously, it has incredible coverage, and it is so unbelievably bulky. I love this Pokemon. It's a great catch-all check to so many things, can take so many hits from so many things. I love the Dunsparce. I think it is by far the best normal in the format, like defensively right now. And getting it pretty late here for Brody was really, really cool. I love this thing. Great catch-all check to so many different things. So really, really cool stuff. Good stuff from Brody. Next up, we have Inteleon for the San Antonio Sparse.
Yes, getting that double water core I think is very nice. There's a lot of teams where you just want that offensive water, and Slowking will not do it unless it's running like Trick Room or Bulky Nasty Plot. And so just being able to get a very fast water spammer is going to be very, very nice for this team. This speed tier is very valued. I think this should have gone maybe to a couple other teams. Not that it's like my favorite mon, it is a little frail, but just being able to U-turn as well is very, very nice. Water and Ice Beam can go into a lot of teams, and you can just run specs and just break something apart and get ready for a Chiyu sweep. So I'm pretty excited to see this mon pop off, but yeah, speed, that's all you need.
100%. Next up, I grabbed my Steel type, and it's Caparajah. Obviously, Raj, I love him, but he's not the best Steel type in the world. It lost access to Heat Crash, I almost said Heat Wave, Heat Crash and Power Up this gen, which is pretty big boons to its move pool. I really appreciated having both of those moves and those options before, especially for the heavy metal sets with Heat Crash, but we still have Heavy Slam, we still have Edgequake coverage, we still have Play Rough, and a lot of cool options offensively. It really has good coverage. Steel, Ground, and Rock covers everything neutrally very, very well. Sets up rocks very reliably, and for its price point, there wasn't a lot better when it came to Steel types, and I kind of prioritized other things more, but I knew that after Caparajah, there was nothing else that I wanted when it came to Steels, so I ended up grabbing this right now, because I couldn't let it get sniped and then just be out of luck when it came to Steels. It also gives me a Fairy Resist right now. I don't have one, and while Caparajah doesn't necessarily beat a lot of fairies and switch into them very reliably, it can always switch into a fairy, take that fairy move, then pivot out on the Focus Blast or the Mystical Fire into something like Sneasler that at least forces them out offensively, so I don't have to take Moonblast to the face with such an offensive Pokemon, if that makes any sense. So it functions as a solid pivot, so yeah, we'll see. Definitely a cool mon. Next up, we have Gothitelle, 4-star.
Oh boy, Gothitelle. It's one of those mons that usually does not get drafted, but when it gets put on a team, it just changes the rules of how you play that team so much. You are one turn away from getting trapped and potentially swept or potentially tricked with something you really don't want, and that is never, never fun. So I think Gothitelle is a very peculiar mon for this team. Yes, it can switch in onto a couple of different things. It can switch from some U-turns and just trap some stuff. And you're just forcing a lot of mons to run items that they would really rather not. So I'm excited to see this mon pop off. It also got access to Focus Blast, which is going to be pretty crazy for just chipping down a Steel. Not that this team really needs help chipping down Steels, but it is there if you really need it.
Oh, 100%. No, I like Goth a lot. I always describe it as a luxury pick. It's not a Pokemon you ever draft for, like, I need this role on my team. But if you can afford a Gothitelle, there's really not that many teams it does not fit on and does not benefit. So I like it a lot. Welcome to Chat Z. I hope your mid-morning nap was good. I'm glad you were able to tuck in for a little bit. He's getting all the waifu mons. He does have Hatterene plus Goth. He only needed Guard, and it would have been immensely favorable in the YouTube algorithm for our boy Star right here. All right, That's the end of round 7. Big standout pick for me. I like the Haxorus that you mentioned earlier. I think that Pokemon is so unbelievably strong. Slowbro was a great pickup for Marcus. Heracross was a great pickup for Tiro, and I love me some Dunsparce, so I think that's a great one as well. Did you have any that super stood out to you?
I would say, Haxorus is very solid. Heracross, Slowbro, and Magnezone were probably my favorites. The Dunsparce is absolutely wild. You're getting so much value out of that mon at 9 points. You can really bring it any week. So I'm excited to see that
Good
mon.
catch-all checks or whatever. And again, only having the one weakness. Oh, it's so nice. Such a good bulky normal. So good. All right, next up. Oop. I accidentally went forward, like we can go rounds. We have a Star here going in round 8, picking up Paldean Tauros. This is a Pokemon, spoilers, I ended up picking up my water next, and I was really debating between Paldean Tauros and the other mon. I was leaning the other mon, but this made my decision a lot easier. Really solid Pokemon, though, on Star's team. Double fighting really isn't the worst thing in the world. I had Breloom, Great Tusk, and BVR last season. Not the end of the world, especially if you have proper resist to the things that you need to switch into. He doesn't have a flying resist right now, so I think that is a bit tough when it comes to having the double fighting, but other than that, it doesn't fit too horribly. Intim, so he has the Intim core between Landorus and Water Bull. Solid speed tier as well, gives him a base 100 mon, which is really good. This Pokemon is very surprisingly versatile, whether it be physically defensive Rocky Helmet sets, whether it be bulk up variants, whether it be assault vest variants, choice scarf, and choice band. There's a lot of things that this thing can do very, very solidly. But yeah, definitely a great Pokemon. These graphics do go very hard. And again, big shouts to Zeke for being a member for a whole month. I appreciate it. If anybody else wants to check out the little join button down there, there's some pretty cool perks. You can even get some funny emotes of me looking like an idiot. But yeah, regardless, really cool pick for Star here. I like the water pick. And there's not a lot of waters left, so I think this was definitely one of the best ones being here. Next up, we have Volcanion. I think I took your pick. Do you want to talk about mine? We're switching order for the last couple.
For sure, yeah, I'm down. Volcanion. I really like this mon. Just having access to Scald and Big Scald is very, very nice. I mean, you know, it's not something that you really thought about in Gen 8, but now that we're in Gen 9 and it's the only mon that gets it, it does it, you know, really well. You can spam it so much. With that said, a very solid water, very solid water immunity, because Zarude, you know, it's not the bulkiest, and you don't really want to force maybe Uxie or Sylveon to get hit like that. But very good coverage, very solid bulk. Access to something like Flame Charge or just having a Scarf is also very nice as well. So you can really run speedy sets, offensive sets. Specs is very, very nice too. And bulk is obviously its bread and butter. Just being able to take a hit and fire back and maybe get a burn.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I love the burn aspect for this team. I think it's great spreading that passive chip that we're looking for. Next up, we have Garganackle here for the San Antonio Spurs. I'm not the biggest Garg guy when it comes to non-Terra. I think Garg functions the best when it's actually, you know, the Terramon, like free Terra, and it's not focusing so much on those Salt Cure sets because Salt Cure is so stoppable and exploitable with just one little coat that you put on, one little covert cloak, and you kind of stuff those sets. I think actually Curse sets with like Edgequake can be very annoying, but this thing does have great upside, right? It does have obviously that ghost resistance with Purifying Soul as well as a hazard or a status immunity. Really solid for it. Having that status absorber is going to be great on a team that really doesn't appreciate getting burned or getting poisoned or whatever it may be. Again, a great ghost resist for this team whose ghost resist at this point was something like Chiyu, so I like the defensive core with this, Slowking, Amoonguss, and to an extent Enamorous Iron Treads. Not really like defensive core, but definitely bulky Pokemon. Sets up rocks reliably, and if someone disrespects Salt Cure and things like that, they're going to have a very bad time when their team takes consistent chip as they can't kill Garganackle because it's Spadef and set up an Iron Defense. So definitely a Pokemon with a good amount of upside and very solid for sure. Next up, we have Orthworm for Brody.
Oh boy, Orthworm. Yes, this mon is a very solid ground immunity. It is a little bit passive in the sense that it really relies on setup in order to deal a lot of damage, but it has rocks and spikes, and frankly, that's all you need in such a fast-paced team like this. If you get rocks up and you die, you've probably done your job as an Orthworm. You could rest easy. And it also alleviates a little bit of pressure from the Slitherwing, just being able to focus more offensively, considering that you now have a ground immunity. And you also have a Steel, which is, again, a very unique type combination. You know, very Corviknight-esque, but, you know, maybe without some of the Corviknight extra stuff that it gets. But I think Orthworm at 6 points is pretty valuable. All it needs to do is just get up a hazard, maybe deal some Rocky Helmet chip or something like that, and it's done its job.
100%. Again, not a lot of steals left. I see this spiking Steelix with a little bit less bulk. is how I kind of see it. And I guess a ground immunity, which is cool. Next up, we have Pat Matt grabbing the Abomasnow right now, getting a little bit of a snow aspect to his team, giving him the Aurora Veil, though, which I think is the big thing right here. Aurora Veil plus that Annihilate can be very, very obnoxious, and even something like Azelf, Garchomp becomes unkillable behind screens. Heatran ends up living an Earthquake because the Reflect is up, and then Azelf setting up Nasty Plots or something like that can be really, really cool, honestly, alongside the hazards that this team does have. I actually like the Aurora Veil aspect. It also really beats down Waters, and he did not have a great way of switching into Unbreaking Waters. He had the Kilowattrel, not the bulkiest thing in the world, doesn't appreciate switching in, taking attacks, things like that. Whereas Abomasnow definitely does and definitely can. It also gives him that ground resist, which, like Marcus was mentioning in the previous rounds, he didn't have one up to this point. So I actually really like the Abomasnow pick. I really like Abomasnow in general this generation, and I think it's just a very solid pickup for his team. We'll see if he ends up going a little bit more with like the snow route, but honestly, he doesn't need to. I think Abomasnow is good on its own. So good Pokemon nonetheless. We have Mudsdale next for...
Oh, man. Yes, Mudsdale for Dashing Sceptile. I think this mon's going to be very good at 7 points. Maybe a little passive too, but just being able to take a hit, get a stamina boost, and then retaliate with a body press, get up rocks or Earthquake with a pretty slept on offensive stat is very, very nice. 7 points, I would say it's pretty cheap, especially because grounds are such a hot commodity in this draft, and there are so few grounds to get. So just having this mon, I think it can really show up to a lot of games. Really fills the hole that Dashing Sceptile might need on this team. Getting up rocks, maybe freeing up Bronzong, because Bronzong's a little bit more passive than Mudsdale. But overall, I think Staraptor and Mudsdale, very solid picks for their points.
For sure, 100%. Next up, we have the final Terra Captain and Regidrago for JV. I think this is a really cool pick. I like this a lot, honestly. This thing with Terra All, being able to Terra Steel, Terra Poison, even Terra Ground, even Terra Dragon if you're playing the team that has a terrible Fairy type that's just not coming against you. I think it's a really cool aspect to it. Whether it be setup Dragonite sets, which I think are best this generation, but even like choice band sets, choice scarf sets, special sets with specs or scarf, and dragon energy, this thing can be very scary, and when you allow it to change its typing and get a way to hit fairies, it's going to be very scary. Kind of like a Regieleki Light, if that makes any sense, but with more setup potential, more win game, like end game win con potential. So yeah, definitely a really, really solid pickup, and I'm really interested to see how the low tier Terra works out, because I think this is like, if you're going to do one a low tier mod, this is one of them. This is a really cool option for JV, and it makes a lot of sense on this team. Not everything really needs Terra on it right now. Leaves kind of needs it to be great. I'm not the biggest Leaves guy without Terra, but he doesn't have the electric terrain anyways. It's kind of there just to like fill a speed tier. Not the best Pokemon in the world, and then things like Zapdos and Tusk like it, but this thing really, really appreciates it. So it's cool to see the commitment to Regidrago and, you know, it being the Terra Captain. So definitely some cool stuff there. Next up, we have Paldean Tauros Blaze for Bruno.
Yes. Oh my goodness, this mod looks very tiny. But it does pack a punch for it being this size of a JPEG. It is very, very nice. I'm a big fan of both the Poroses of the unique type combos. And just having access to Will-O-Wisp on this set, I think makes it really, really cool defensively. Just being able to status something, especially on a team that is as bulky as this. If you can just get a physical mon out of the game, that just might be the win right there. So having this mon potentially intimidate, obviously you have cut you as well, and you have firefighting stabs. So you can just run stuff offensively and just rock mons off the bat. And just having that speed tier is also very nice, because obviously you have Ursaluna at a very low 50. And so having Poros at 100, I think is going to be very, very useful for a team like this. Just pick up some kills, wisp some stuff, and that's kind of all you need with a mon like this.
100%, definitely a really good one. Next up, we are going to have Mousehold. So someone did end up drafting the Mouse House. It does have access to probably the best removal move in the game. I don't think this team necessarily needed it, but there's no way the hazards are ever staying up against this team. So I think that really frees up Enamorus and Bax to not have to run boots. Same thing with Torn, because this team's removal is so damn good. Tidy Up is obviously a great move, and then Population Bomb is a great move if the item Rocky Helmet didn't exist. And obviously you can run protective pads, but then you're probably getting 3 hits because Population Mob doesn't hit a lot when it's not boosted by a wide lens. So it's a bit of a give and take. You're either not getting a lot of damage off because you only get off 3 hits, or you're dying in 7 hits because the steel type with Rocky Helmet ended up switching in. But if someone doesn't respect the mouse and they don't prep for it very particularly, it can really go crazy. And for 7 points and the removal it offers and things like that, it can definitely be pretty solid. So I think it's a Pokemon that definitely commands a certain amount of respect in the builder, and that's valuable in its own right. So I understand the pickup to an extent here from Q here with the mouse hold. Tiny Rillaboom. You want to talk about Tiny Rillaboom?
Howdy Rillaboom, the small monkey. I'm really excited to see this Mon in Gen 9. Obviously, it did lose Grassy Glide, and Grassy Glide was even nerfed. So, man, that was just really insult to injury right there. But Rillaboom still has access to grassy terrain, and so it can do some pretty fun things. I think this team can definitely use it. Just being able to have an extra little bit of passive healing is very, very nice. Having a ground resistance for the whole team is very nice as well. And being able to maybe proc some grassy seeds. On a Volk, if maybe there's a really poor set of rockers on the other team, you could just run Grassy Seed and set up and win. So I'm excited to see this Mon pop off. I think offensively, just having Banded, Wood Hammer is very, very nice. The fighting moves are kind of lame because I think you have like Low Sweep and maybe Drain Punch.
You have Drain Punch, yeah, but no more Superpower, unfortunately. You also get Stomping Tantrum, I think, for ground coverage, but no more high horsepower. So you're really losing out on a lot. Nice. Yeah. I think it actually fits this team really well, though. I think if there was a Rillaboom team, it was this one. So, next up, speaking of broken grass types, we have Big Brambleghast next. I think Tiro grabbed this because he really wanted Spin on his team, because he has a lot of hazard pressure with Diancie, Heracross, and now even Brambleghast, which gets access to spikes. He doesn't always want to defog those away, so getting access to Spin here was great. He also didn't have a fighting resist that wasn't named Heracross, so getting an immunity is definitely really clutch for this team. It could be really obnoxious with access to Strength Sap, Rapid Spin, Spikes. It's pretty decently strong too with Power Whip, and it's a grass type that's immune to Hurricane, which is also really cool and forces different kinds of coverage and things like that, which might not necessarily help Brambleghast, but if Torn-T is running, Bleak Wind instead of, or no, it can't run Bleak Wind because it's a wind move.
No.
If Torn-T is running Air Slash because it wants to hit Brambleghast, then the rest of your team switches in even better, which is just like a random example off the top of my head, but actually this team kind of cooks Torn defensively, but definitely a very, very solid Pokemon here. I like Brambleghast a lot on this team, despite its low point value and it not being the best Pokemon in the world. This is a team that it fits very well on. Next up, we have Venomoth.
Venomoth is kind of another one of those setup options. You do obviously have the Espathra, which is there. It's the big presence that you really have to focus on. But having a setup option with Sleep Powder, I think is very nice for this team. Being able to take advantage of those double screens and a parting shot can be very, very nice. And just having a Mon that can really not care about what the opposing type is as well is very, very nice too. Just being able to get a Bug Buzz off after a Quiver Dance and a Sleep Powder is very cool. At 8 points, I think it's a little bit expensive, and I think sometimes you're just gonna, be running a little bit too much of the same stuff. It's gonna be a little bit redundant with the Spathra because you're still, if you get like Roared or Taunted or Encored or Dragon-tailed or whatever it is, if it works on a Spathra, it probably works on Venomoth too. But having Sleep Powder, I think, is very cool for this team.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's definitely a big cheese potential Mon with all the screens and things like that. So I understand the pick for sure. Next up, we have Rotom Heat for Oboe. Still lacking the Steel type after that Orthworm Snipe. But he does grab Rotom, which is, again, great momentum on this team. That's the whole point of it, is we're getting up hazards and we're chipping things down with Volt Switch and U-Turn and Chili Reception and whatever it may be. And whittling things down into range of either that Terra All Urshifu or that Dragapult. And I think Rotom is a great, Pokemon to do so. Gives him a secondary Fairy Resist too. Takes a little bit of pressure off the Glow-King. It's a ground immunity. Does a lot of things defensively and offensively. I'm still a big Rotom fan. I know, again, they lost a lot. They lost Defog, Toxic, and Pain Split, but they're still so unbelievably good and still so unbelievably obnoxious for so many teams to deal with. So I'm definitely big on the Rotom here. I think it's a good solid pick. And at 8 points, that is a fucking steal. That is a really, really good price to get a Rotom Heat at. Again, I know it's worse, but 8-point Rotom Heat is crazy to pick up. Next up, we have Delphox for... Oh, just kidding. We have Gallade for you. Do you want to talk about your Gallade pick? I felt like I tapped it twice, and I was like, let me double check.
All good, all good. I think Galeta 9's really cool. My team, I think, definitely could have used a fighting, and just having something that can break alongside Palathin if I want to like clean with it, or maybe if I want to clean with Lando Eye is very, very nice. I think at 9 points, it's a bit slept on. At the start of the gen, it was like 7 points, which is just criminal. And I think as a result, it got over tiered a little bit, up to like 11 or 12. And I think 9's pretty comfortable. I'll take it as a fighting type. Very good access to coverage. Sharpness is obviously phenomenal as well. So I'm excited to use this mon. It can be used to break. It can be used to clean. It is pretty cool in general. So happy I got it this late in the round, or in the draft.
For sure, definitely a really good steal here. Next up, we have Delphox here for Thomas, and I actually think Delphox is a Pokemon people are super sleeping on this generation. It got some pretty considerable buffs going into the game. It got access to Nasty Plot, it got access to Encore, Agility, Stored Power, and there was something else it got access to, but even just those alone, oh, and Focus Blast, I believe it got access to. So it got access to a lot of really cool things that upped it offensively and defensively. It has a great speed tier. Fire Psychic is a great offensive typing and a solid defensive typing as well, as per the other ones that we see in something like, Victini or something of the sorts. Or even Armor Rouge, really have a great typing, when it comes to Fire and Psychic, and is very, very versatile and very, very annoying to beat, whether it be like fat Wish sets or really offensive scary sets with its great speed tier. I like this Pokemon a lot, and I think this was a great pickup for Thomas. I like it a ton. It really helps Valiant as being the only Pokemon that can kill a Steel type, but he also didn't really switch into those very well, because those Pokemon that resist the Steel moves in Scizor are just a coverage move away from dying. Thundy isn't the bulkiest thing, doesn't have any recovery, and Valiant definitely doesn't want to switch in on him. So I really like Delphox a lot for this team. I think this is a really great pickup for Thomas, and good eyes in catching it. Next up, we have Grafai from Ricky to end off the round.
Yes, this is a saucy Pokemon to say the least. Just getting access to T-Spikes, Super Fang, I think is just a little bit heinous. You can always just parting shot on stuff. You can get a little nasty with Sword Stance. I think it actually does learn Nasty Plot. Maybe? I'm not sure. So. I wouldn't bring it, but it is kind of cool just having all these really cool support moves all on one Pokemon with that speed tier is very, very nice. You have Prankster as well. And in such a hyper offensive metagame, I think the coolest thing about this mon is Prankster Copycat. Being able to use your opponent's move or your move if you moved first, just to be able to knock something out, I think is very, very, very slept on. That, I think, is going to be the state of the game. If this mon can show up against Rain, copycat something, show up against something with priority, revenge it, I think that's really cool. All in the 6-point Pokemon. Oh, I would say I wouldn't pick it up myself, but damn, I'm scared a little bit.
No, I actually really like this thing. I think it's super slept on, and it also gives him a really good speed tier on this team. He didn't have anything around that 110 mark. Now he does, and I think that was a great pickup by Cherokee. I like this pick a lot. I super agree. End of round 8. We're getting towards the tail end of the draft. Starting next round, I think we have one coach finish next round even. We're getting to the point where a lot of coaches are ending off and, rounding off their drafts. Good value picks this round. I personally really like my Volk pick. I love the Reggie Drago. I love the Rillaboom. And then I think Rotom Heat and Grafai and Delphox are probably some really big standouts to me as well. Do you have any quick standouts?
I think they actually all look pretty good for the round that they're in. I would say in terms of some of the quality, Bramblegast maybe isn't the best, but I think it fits the team very well, so I'll give that, a bonus point for that. Mousehold, I don't think fits the team very well, but it can maybe handle some of the steals that Enamorus and Excalibur break, which is cool. But overall, I think pretty solid round for everybody.
Oh, 100%. Definitely, we're getting to that tail end here. Next up, we have Shuyan Braviary here for J. Ricky. He gives him Defog as well, which is another Defogger on his team, which is pretty cool. This thing could be really scary offensively, too, from what I've seen. I believe it gets access to Sheer Force and Tinted Lens. Am I tripping when I say that? Let me see. Sheer Force and Tinted Lens, which are both very solid offensive abilities. Its signature move in Esper Ring is really cool. It's 80 base power and it guaranteed boosts your speed and has high crit. So I think on Tinted Lens sets, that set is really, really cool. It really shores up this thing's pretty bad speed stat in 65, but has a really high HP stat, really high special attack stat. It can Calm Mind and it can Agility. It can Roost, I believe, as well, right? It does get access to Roost, which is really cool. And again, has great coverage overall because of that Psychic Flying Stab alongside Heat Wave. Can be really tough for a lot of teams. Shadow Ball is a great option. It does get access to U-Turn, so for its price point, it's honestly not a bad Pokemon at all, and it has a 6 shiny too, so that's always a benefit. Next up, we have Quillfish here for Thomas.
Oh boy, I think this is actually a very natural pick for this team. Getting up a grounded poison and getting a water is very nice. If you had to get a water, which again, waters are also really rare in this draft pool, getting up Quillfish at 6 points is very nice. Getting access to statuses, getting access to T-Spikes, spikes, and just like self-destructing. I don't think it learns explosion in this one. Maybe it does, which is a little bit cope. I don't know why they'd get rid of that, but it is very nice just to show up, get some stuff up, annoy some stuff, and die. Especially when you have such cool breakers in the back or sweepers. Just having an extra hazard, an Intimidate user as well, and maybe a Rocky Helmet user can be very, very useful and can be all the difference for something like an Iron Valiant sweep.
Oh, 100%. I like this pickup a lot. Great roll compression, very late in the draft getting something like this. Next up, we have Big Hisuian Electrode. I love this Pokemon to death, man. This thing is so much fun. It gives a really elite speed tier, being the fastest thing in the metagame, I believe, that we can draft outside of Regieleki, which I think does get picked up later on. But that doesn't count because that Pokemon sucks and this Pokemon is good. I love this thing. The dual stab of Electric and Grass is very solid, whether it be just to Volt around. Really only opposing grasses take you on super, super well. Otherwise, you can just Volt around forever, throw off big Leaf Storms, or you can rock it with really annoying sub-leech sits. Like, this thing is really cool. I love me some Hisuian Electrode. I've used Terratrode in the past, and that Pokemon is even better, but I think this Pokemon nonetheless is very solid. And honestly, the grassy terrain support that Arboliva is going to provide allows really strong Leaf Storms to come out and, you know, click buttons and hit really hard. So this Pokemon's definitely really, really cool. I'm here for the Trode. Next up, we have a Pokemon I'm not here for in Blissey. What do you think?
Oh boy. Yeah, I can't say I'm a big fan of this mon, but it is going to be very annoying to pair alongside Glowking, just being able to handle those fighting types in Glowking, and then just go back out into Blissey to handle the ghosts and potentially a lot of the darks with dark pulses is very, very nice. Especially with a team that does have a dark type and a dark resist and ghost resist in Iron Jugulus. It's not very great. So just having Blissey is nice. Being able to get up rocks is pretty huge, and being able to maybe Wish Pass into something could be nice. I don't really want to face this mon. I don't really want to talk about this mon anymore. Get this off my screen, please.
True. I do worry about the momentum that is going to suck for that team.
I agree.
Next up, we have Zap. Oh my gosh, look at his slide, Brody. I don't know what happened with the Zapdos slide.
Automation moment.
New game. Figure out what part of Zapdos it decided to zoom in on. I think it's its neck. I'm pretty. Yep. It's like this little neck portion right here. But Zapdos, really, really cool Pokemon. I like the speed tier that it offers. I like the offensive capabilities alongside Qianpao. I really love the momentum that it grabs. This Pokemon is very, very strong. It is so much fun to use Zapdos, man. This thing is so strong, so difficult to switch into. Obviously, the dual stabs are great. But Thunderous Kick is also such an annoyingly spammable move, guaranteeing getting like defense drops on Pokemon and making it to where that fairy type or that psychic type that switches into your fighting move just dies to Brave Bird after is so unbelievably annoying. So definitely an obnoxious mon. Blissey did keep Wish. Kaz, it did keep it. I think for a little bit we thought it lost it, but no, it doesn't get Wish. No, never mind. I'm wrong.
Wait, really?
Why did you draft Blissey then, Oppo?
Oh no! Oh, it's just a sitting duck.
It does nothing. HP. Oh no! Wait, hold on. I have to check now. Oh my god, it doesn't get Wish. It gets Healing Wish. Way. That's the best you'll get out of it. Let it die and then move on. Damn it, Obo. Yes. Okay. Next up, we have Crocodile for T-Row. Oh look, it's his nose. See, we're playing a new game.
Crocodile is a very phenomenal ground and dark type, especially at this point in the draft. Really great pickup by T-Row, just being able to intimidate, get rocks up, and it has access to some very solid offensive tools. Earthquake's really nice. I don't think it gets knockoff this gen, which is very saddening.
Crunch,
but
yeah.
Crunch and Dark is
No, Lost Darkest
Lair
too.
either?
Lost Darkest too.
No way!
Mm-hmm.
Man, that sucks. But two very useful abilities in Intimidate and Moxie. You can always pick up like a surprise sweep if it is Scarf Moxie one of those weeks. But other than that, it can be a very good glue. Just being able to get in, get rocks, maybe get some helmet chip, and pressure a couple different mons. Very useful for this team, especially when you have Corviknight, which is gonna bring the electrics in.
100%. Next up, we have the best fairy in the format. Look at Big Wiggles. Big Wigglytuff here for John. It does give him some wish with a pretty high HP stat. And I think for any of the fairies that you could have gotten, I think this is probably the best one left. So that's definitely fair. Decent, especially defensively. It helps out a lot with the ghost weakness right now. He had no ghost switch in whatsoever. So I think Wiggly is going to be forced to come a lot more than you would think a Wiggly would come. Or he's going to have it and just be very upset about having a Wigglytuff that doesn't actually beat the things it's supposed to beat. But like its typing and its move pool and like theoretically what it can do is perfect. So definitely pretty cool. Next up, Hisuian Quillfish, which is a really cool mon here for Q.
Yes, a very solid Ebulite user, very good Dark type for its points, and very good grounded poison too. Obviously, it doesn't really like the ground type, but when you have Enamorus, Tornadus, and Mesprit, you really don't have to worry about that too much. Obviously, getting access to spikes and T-spikes is very, very nice in a mon like this. Just being able to get in, get some hazards up, and maybe, you don't have to bring Fortress 1 week where, Fortress really feels like you got to bring it is very nice too. And so just good utility right off the bat. Not the strongest mon. I remember having used, I guess it's big form over Quill, and it just kind of sets up and booms some days, but sometimes that's kind of all you need. And maybe it means that Fortress doesn't have to go. Maybe it means that you can run maybe something a little bit different. Maybe it's like to check something very specifically. So just having another bulky ball like that is kind of cool.
100%. I like Hisuian Quillfish a lot. Definitely a cool mon. Next up, we have Hydreigon here for the Chernobyl Dragologies. Definitely a really, really cool Pokemon. It gives him more rocks. It's his second rocker, so it takes a little bit of pressure off Glamora if you feel like running Stealth Rock Hydreigon, which I don't know if you ever want to run. This thing losing access to Roost was a big downside to it defensively. Those like bulky nasty plot sets, or just those bulky 3 attacks like Hydra sets, really took a big hit this generation. But I also think Hydreigon is so much better offensively this generation because there are no fairies in this format. So you have those masters where you can go Specs or Scarf and absolutely clean through teams. So I'm still a big Hydra fan. I think a lot of people shit on it a little bit more than it deserves. I like the speed tier for the team as well. I like grabbing the Dark type. I like the Dragon. I like the ground immunity as well. Another ground immunity. This team does not care about Earthquakes whatsoever. So definitely a really cool Pokemon and the best rocker, as Jay Ricky said. The best rocker. Next up,
Yes.
we have Big Bear Ursaring here for JV.
Yes. Little small in the team preview now, but it is big. I think as a normal type, just being able to get the most out of its value is like something really big about normal types. I think a lot of the mons that are normal at about this range really do it. And Ursaring, maybe I'm a little less high on at 6 points, but it is very bulky with Ebulite. It can just SD and shred through stuff. It could potentially run a little bit more setup, like something a little bulkier, maybe like Purse, if I'm not mistaken, it gets, or Bulk Up, one of those two.
Bulk Up and Sword Stance, so either which one.
Yeah, so very bulky mon, especially with Guts. You can't status this thing or else you will be getting hit for 1.5 times the damage. And being able to rest up is very nice too for Ursaring. So overall, I think pretty good mon. In terms of ghost resists, I think Ursaring's pretty good down at 6 points, considering that you don't really want to take a lot of ghost hits with the Hisuian Samurott. But with that said, I think pretty decent budget pick.
I drafted Ursaring last season of BBR, and I wasn't super big on it. I was kind of annoyed that I ended up getting Ursaring as my ghost immunity, but it ended up coming to way more games than I thought. It ended up being super clutch in every game it came. It single-handedly made it to where I didn't lose to Kurt. It was my Volk check. I think it from +3 Volk, Spadef, Eviolite, Ursaring to it KO. I was absolutely eating from it. And then you get that gust boost when you're rested and you're sleep talking and things like that. Really cool mon. I'm actually super here for the Ursaring. I was put onto the truth. That's Big Bear. Good mon. Okay.
That's great to see then. The normals are eating this gen.
Next up, we have the Seattle Siglith grabbing a Dunsparce here. Again, another low budget Eviolite normal type. Again, this team is super, super weak to ghost. I actually don't hate the double normal pickup, considering one, Dunsparce is so cheap, and two, the other normal is something offensive like Raptor. I like grabbing this because this team did get cooked by any offensive ghost up to this point. Like this team runs up on a Gengar, the game was over, and it still kind of gets cooked by Gengar. But there's other ones that it can definitely check and things like that, which is cool. It gives them another rocker too, which is pretty slept on. It gives them glare. Honestly, really solid value pick here from Dashing here, which is pretty darn cool. Next up, we have Komala from Pat Mac. This is a snipe. I got sniped with Komala in this draft. That's how bad Paldea Dex is. I never thought I would have said a sentence like that before, too.
For sure. I mean, the normal types are going this round, and Komala having access to spin and U-turn can be very, very nice on a team. Just being able to get in, get out, spin, do its thing. Wish is also nice, and it does lose access to its best offensive set, which is Sleep Talk Last Resort, which I don't know how much that really affects it, but Komala overall, at 3 points, you really can't go wrong with it. It does something that a lot of mons can't do in terms of removing hazards, since there is a massive defog purge across the whole generation. So I think a very solid pickup for Pat Mac.
For sure. Next up, we have Lycanroc Dusk here for Brody. Solid speeds here for him in that 110-ish range. A little bit faster than Wake, a little bit slower than the Meowscarada. Strong priority as well. Incredibly strong with Tough Claws. Sets up rocks. Very simple mon. It's going to come in. It's going to click a button. It's going to have, make your opponent have a bad time. I like the immediate offense that it gives. Brody's kind of gone a little bit more towards, the slow passive bulk route with Claude. Guard is obviously offensive than Dodon. And Orthworm, I like getting a little bit more immediate offense. And again, I'm always here for priority because of the Mickey potential in Gen 9 Paldea with Terra and setup and all this bullshit shenanigans. I really like having a lot of priority because it means cheese and setup is never really going to beat you. People are going to have to find a different way to do so. So I like this pickup a lot right here. Next up, we have Titan.
Yes, and as you can see, it's rounding out the draft for Will. He has no more points. Last mon. Titan, very solid hail abuser, and if you don't really prep for it, it can just break teams right off the bat. Not the greatest attack, but it does have a lot of bulk, and in some weeks you can just bring belly drum and really cleave through stuff. It can also operate outside of hail with thick fat or sheer force, which is very nice as well, but that's going to kind of round out the team, and I think having that speed option is very nice considering your only really fast mons are Inteleon and Iron Treads. So just picking up another mon like that. I guess you also have Thunder Eye, but I think getting a mon that really, really outspeeds a lot of stuff is very, very cool as well.
It just gives another facet to the team as well. I'm not big on Titan. They drafted in the first Wi-Fi league he did of Gen 9 and VR Season 4 was or whatever. And I hated him because it's weird, on paper he looks good, but he really, really struggles into any water ever. But this team does deal with waters very well, and things like Amoonguss, even Slowking, and then Thundy. So, and obviously things like Treads and Chiyu can force those in, so maybe they'll open up the door for Titan to clean up one game. Next up, we have me. I end up picking up Braviary right here. I didn't have a Ghost Immunity, and I think Braviary is actually a pretty slept-on one. This also gives me defog. I don't have any removal right now. And that's... I know a lot of people really hate that. It's not the biggest deal for me because I will put boots on every one of my Pokemon and not care. And I have a lot of hazards, so I actually think I force my opponents to defog a lot more than I would ever want to defog with my team personally. But it does give me that option. And with like a Spadef reset, it can be really, really obnoxious to try and, break this thing with your offensive ghost. So I really like the versatility that Braviary offers, whether it be that or Scarf variants, Bulk Up variants, Sheer Force, Defiant. Honestly, it really slept on mon in my opinion. So I like the pickup right here personally. Then to round off the round, we have the greatest steel type of all time. We have Big Reverum here for Star to round out round number 9.
I like Reverum. I'm actually really surprised that it fell to this point in the draft, but picking it up at 6 points is an absolute steal. It is a theft. And I think this mon has a lot of great utility, being able to parting shot, being able to get up T-spikes, and then also have the ability to set up. You don't exactly know what this mon's going to be bringing on a weekly basis. So I think this mon is very nice at 6. Again, I think it fits the team, I would say, pretty naturally. Maybe it does have a bit of a hindrance because you do have the actual Alolan Muck on this team as opposed to the one on J. Ricky's team. So you have a little bit of a ground problem. But when you got Breloom and you got Lando, and then you have a potential Terra type in Skeledirge, I think that's pretty good in terms of utility.
No, Alolan Muck wasn't drafted twice. There's a mess up. So we did automated slides this time with Brody, and there was a mess up in the automation to where J. Ricky drafted Noivern, but for some reason it decided it was Alolan Muck. So J. Ricky's had an Alolan Muck on all his slides. I hope he could probably have Brody fix that for his draft styles because I know he hasn't recorded that yet. But you can do a jetpack overheat, and that does damage, and damaging moves are way cooler than status moves. So I agree, Trek. So round 9, we rounded off right here. Big standout picks for me. I mean, Hydreigon in round 9 is always a good time. Hydreigon, Croak, Gyarados all going in round 9 is pretty darn insane. Those are obviously all incredible Pokemon. I love the regular Quillfish pickup on Thomas's team, as well as the Hisuian, I believe, on JV's team. I think it was that it ended up going to. Now, obviously, we do have a good old No-Wish Blissey here going at the beginning of round 9 as well, which I didn't know that until just now, and that makes that Pokemon a Pokemon of all time. But
it's basically just a tub of Crisco. Like, you just got to get through it and then you're good.
But yeah, that's going to be round 9. Do you have any standout picks that really stood out to you?
In terms of big mons, I mean, a couple, I guess it's cheaping out a little bit, but for the guys who were able to save points and go back up and get some really natural picks in the Galar, Zapdos, and in the Crocodile, I think that's really big. Same with Hydreigon, so big shout outs to those picks.
For sure. Oop. I always keep forgetting. Next up, we have round number 10. We're getting really close. This is the last, full round. I think the only person... Wait a minute. Hold on. Did Star finish his pick? His draft right there?
Star got 2 more.
So I'm a little bit off with my order, unfortunately, gang. We will see right here. Hold on.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. We're good. You didn't see that. All right, next up we have Rotom here for Star. Giving him a ghost, a little bit of... Oh, wait, this is yours. Go ahead and talk about Rotom.
All good. Rotom, not having access to Pain Split is a little unfortunate. I think there was one set in Gen 8 where Rotom could just run it, and it would be fine in literally every single scenario, and that was Volt Switch, Hex, Willow, Pain Split. It would just always do that, and it'd be pretty good at it. Not getting Pain Split kind of sucks, but being able to basically do the rest is really nice. And at 5 points... It didn't really go down in price at all, which kind of sucks, but it's still a pretty usable mon. Just being able to have that ground immunity, which Starfish definitely was looking for. I think that's pretty solid, and being able to pivot into stronger stuff, better stuff is nice too.
Oh, 100%. Oh, well, you're good to upload a draft analysis, bro. We'll be done here in the next 10, 15. The last 2 rounds are always really quick. You're good. It's all good if there's a little bit of overlap. No worries. Next up, big Nachi stack for me. I wanted another rocker. I also wanted, again, I was kind of hyping up Braviary as a good ghost immunity, but there are certain instances where maybe it's not, and Knuckle Stack does kind of give me that option, and I think for 2 points, it's great value. If I can get my 2-pointer to force you to run a Covert Cloak on some mon because you don't want to be Salt Cured down, that's a win in my books, right? It gives me a rocker. It gives me another flying resist, which I really struggle with offensive flyings right now, with only having Sandy Shock. So, Sandy Shocks and Copperajah, which aren't the most reliable, flying resist in the world. So I actually think this thing really shores up some defensive holes and at least kind of pads my defensive backbone for only 2 points. And again, gives me great value, makes a lot of prep to be forced as well. So big Knuckle Stack. Hopefully it'll pop off for me this season when it comes to 1 game or 0 games and cheers from the sidelines. I don't know. He might just sit on the bench, but cute little guy. I definitely love little Nachi. Next up, we have Alolan Persian for Brody here.
Oh no. Oh, I am not a fan of this mon. I think it fits the team okay. Like, it was probably the last dark type before you got to Croc. So I guess I understand the pick. But Alolan Persian, it hits a nice speed tier. It gets Parting Shot, and it has some offensive presence on paper with the potential for Nasty Plot. I don't think it's very good, but it is there. You also have access to Taunt and a couple interesting moves in that sense, just to kind of get in, get out, annoy some stuff, prevent setup. I don't really see this mod showing up. I think it overlaps a lot with Meowscarada, but if Meowscarada really needs that offensive role, and then you really need that dark type in the back, I guess Alolan Persian does exist on this team.
I wish a team like this had I feel like the teams that Alolan Persian fits on are teams that really, really appreciate Parting Shot for really reliable setup, and I think this team does kind of lack that need, and he has the dark type. It's not the bulkiest when it comes to ghost resist, so I'm not the biggest on the alone person too. I 100% agree. Next up, we have Meloetta, which I'm excited to see this thing come back. I haven't seen somebody use a Meloetta in a drafting game since, like, 2017, dude. It feels like it's been so long since I've seen this thing in a natural dex, and you typically don't see it drafted in nat decks a lot, so it's really cool to see it in a limited dex format. Great Spadef, great with an AV. It's really going to appreciate wishes from Florges as well. So it's going to be really solid in that regards. A little bit more of a reliable normal type. I also wonder if Pat Mac was originally planning on getting to Titan. That Will ended up sniping from him right here, because he does have the double normal, he does have the double psychic. It's not a bad Pokemon, and I think it's really cool. I don't know how well it fits, because I know that Azelf is going to perform the offensive things that Meloetta would like better, more, and Meloetta is a little bit better of a ghost resist than Komala, obviously, so it kind of overlaps with Komala in that regards, but still a very good Pokemon, and I'm interested to see it, be used and things like that. So, yeah, we'll see. Next up, we have Big Ments for Dashing Gear. What a good mon.
Yeah, and it really helps with the flying situation. You don't really want Staraptor to be that defensive flying role, especially now that it's lost Roost. Doesn't really work. So having Big Ments, being able to intimidate, and also having a second intimidate user is very nice too. Just being able to bring this mon very reliably to a lot of your games is also very nice for dashing. So I'm excited to see it. It's a bit of an overpay, in my opinion, because with this gen, you do create a bit of a disparity between the mons that can actually Terra Captain in terms of their value, and then the mons that can't. It's priced at 15 because it has the potential to terastallize, but obviously Dashing went with the Moth instead. So maybe a little bit of an overpay, but at the end of the round, if you really don't have any other options, I think Ments is pretty solid, very bulky, and very versatile.
Very much so. Aaron, so everybody has one Terra Captain, but it's free Terra. So, for example, on Dashing's team right here, there's a lot of Pokemon that are banned from Terraing, like Chien-Pao, Palafin, things like that, Holt. But Iron Moth is Dashing's Terra Captain. And for example, the next pick, which is going to be JV's, his is Reggie Drago. But for this round, he's picking up Cloyster to round things off. Now, Cloyster, big hit this generation, and it did lose access to Rapid Spin. Rapid Spin and Boom, being both gone from its move pool, is pretty tough for Cloyster, but I do like the setup option for it. I do like the fact that it can be a little bit physically defensive and a little bit annoying in that regard. I think losing Spin really hurts this thing's defensive viability, and I think its price should kind of reflect that, and I feel like it should be a little bit lower. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of Cloyster with no Spin, but those Shell Smash sets, if you can find the position to set that up, throw off those Skill Link, Rock Blast, and Icicle Spears, Priority Ice Shard, and things like that, he'll be in a good spot. Pretty cool mod, and again, if you have the luxury to pick it up and, grab that second offensive water, it can definitely do some work, and it's a great cheese mod. It definitely can, go to town and do some work, so it's still a pretty cool mod nonetheless. Next up, we have Zangoose here, rounding out the Chernobyl Dragalge's draft.
Oh boy, big Zangoose giving you the mean look in the little
yeah, I know,
right
he's peeking.
It's a fun mon, pretty solid speed, and at 5 points, really can't go wrong with this mon. Being able to Sword Stance, use Toxic Orb, and just shred something is very nice, especially when you have a Torn T, especially when you have a hit Hydreigon that can really get a lot of mileage out of handling those steel types. If you just bring this 1 week by surprise and it takes care of the steel, it's definitely done its job for the whole season. It's very useful, and I think normal types, this is the gen for the normal types, so I'm excited to see this mod pop off and do its role.
I love how good offensively it is. He is so weak to ghost types, though, so we'll see how that ends up going. I think it puts a lot of pressure on Ursaluna to be like fat AV sets where you don't really want to do that, so we'll see. Next up, we have big Spide Outs here for Q. At the very least, forcing prep and forcing more removal options into his team, which can be pretty tough. He doesn't have a spin blocker to really stop the spin coming out to stop all of his hazards, but he has a lot of hazards, and adding sticky webs on top of that is pretty obnoxious for, opposing teams to deal with. That's unfortunately all Spide Ops really offers. It has a great move pool and 2 solid abilities in Insomnia for, niche instances, and Stakeout is a really strong offensive ability. Its stats are just so bad, though. I have no idea what they were thinking when they made this Pokemon stat spread. It's really bad when it comes to that regard, but for a 2-point Pokemon, it forces more prep than 90% of 2-point Pokemon do, so I'm definitely here for it. I drafted in BBR last season, and it definitely pleasantly surprised me. It did pretty well. This is the Toad Scroll counter, so cool mon, nonetheless. Next up, we have Non-Terra D-Knight, which I'm so happy to see drafted. I really want to see this thing do well. Do you want to talk about Non-Terra D-Knight?
Sure. Non-Terra D-Knight, at 13 is kind of crazy. I think it should have been priced a little higher, but obviously you still have that disparity between the ones that can Terrasilize and that can't. Or was this Terra banned entirely?
This was Terra banned entirely. Oops, I went backwards.
Okay. Yes. So, completely non-Terra D-Knight at 13, I think is really cool. Very slept on in Gen 8, being able to just hit a lot of things with DD. And then you also have some very interesting, like, bulky special sets. I know for, like, the 3v3 meta, people have been running, like, Fire Spin and stuff like that. So people have been getting really creative. And I think in a draft format, just having all those Gen 1, like, weird moves that it's kept over time is going to be very creatively useful for this mon. Just being able to be bulky, maybe set up some DDs, clean up. You do have a little bit of a counter synergy with maybe like Earthquake to deal with steals with Rillaboom, which might have terrain. But other than that, I think this mon is a very cool pickup for John.
100%. Next up, we have Electros here, not rounding out T-Rose team, but very solid Pokemon. I think it really helps out with the fact that he didn't really beat Water super reliably. Obviously, he has Bundle, and obviously he has Bramble Gas, but I think having another option is great. This thing alongside AV is going to be great, catching wishes from Rigraff and things like that, having great momentum, great offenses, and honestly just having great coverage overall. Really solid Pokemon. It's the Gen 6 and 7 draft see this thing go so early back in the day because it has no weaknesses. I don't know. Electros is the Pokemon I think of when I think of like old school draft because I feel like it was so overvalued back then that now people are like, I'm not touching this fucking thing. So it's cool to see it get picked up here in this. So definitely really cool. Next up, we have Masquerain for mid here. A little bit of webs action.
Oh boy, this is the second, maybe the first best webs user in the game, but Masquerain, the only thing it needs to do is show up, use the one move, and that's kind of all it needs to do. It does have access to Stun Spore and Intimidate, which can be a little bit pesky at the start of games and kind of throws some opponents off. And just being able to get a Paralysis would just be pretty crazy for just a 1-point mon. Again, maybe like Quiver Dance if you just have to throw on another move. But this is Sticky Web to the button, and it does it pretty well. So for 1 point, I think it's good for mid.
Oh, 100%. I think it's better than Spite Ups personally, so I think this is a good pickup for sure. Next up, we have Big Berserker. This is Oboe Steel type, and to be fair, there's not much left. I think considering the tools that were left, this is actually a pretty good pickup. It grabs momentum. It's really strong offensively, honestly. It just is lacking that speed department and that bulk department, but you kind of got to make do with what you got. When life gives you lemons, you make a really bad Steel type, and that's going to be Oboe's. But again, offensively, I think it's great. He's going to really struggle switching into, a lot of things that Fairies really appreciated and things like that. Like a good, strong offensive fighting in particular against this team, I think is really, really good. Because something like Loking with a little bit more Spadef, when he runs into like Urshifu or something like that, he's going to have a really, really bad time. So there's a lot of conventional typings like with him getting Mimikyu and Berserker. It's going to kind of, be tough on, but his team offensively is still very, very good. So we'll see. Next up, we have Lycanroc Midday. Do you want to talk about your Lycanroc?
For sure. Lycanroc, I think, kind of just fills in that speed tier a little more. Hisuian Electrode and Lycanroc were just me kind of coming up with some ideas in terms of speed. I really like their ability to pressure stuff right off the gate. And then for Lycanroc, I really like its ability just to get up rocks in the early game. Maybe throw off an Endeavor or something like that. That's kind of funky as well. But it can also break and sweep too. Again, priority is really cool in this gen, and Accel Rock is going to be very useful too. If it really doesn't work, I can always just trade it out. 8 points can still get me some cool stuff. So just having this mon is nice for now, and if not, maybe it goes.
That's fair. Next up, we have Big Belly Bolt. I'm always a Big Belly Bolt guy, and I actually really like this pickup right here. A more defensive electric type is actually pretty solid when you have your Thundurus. That's one, going to be tearing, and two, when Thundurus was your flying resist. And I know it's weird to like focus in so much on flying resist, but it's such a spamble typing with no immunities, and there's so many scary offensive flying types. I think it's super scary. So I really like the Belly Bolt with access to Slack Off. It can volt around, photosynthesis, and static is great abilities. It gets water coverage as well for ground types, so it isn't absolutely hard stuff by grounds. I've seen this thing live ungodly hits. I saw 1v1 a Great Tusk without a Shuka-Berry one time. Very solid Pokemon for its price point. I actually really like it on Thomas's team, so definitely really cool. Next up, we have a bad electric type. Would you like to talk about the bad electric type that Jay
For
Ricky ended up
sure.
having?
Well, post-draft, we did realize that it got nerfed, and so Transistor only does 1.3 times the damage of electric moves instead of 1.5. And then at the same time, I guess it got Terra Blast, which is nice, but that's kind of all the coverage that you're going to be seeing on Regieleki. I've used it only once in kind of like a for-fun league, and personally, what I get the most out of it is just being able to bring in the ground type and explode on it and just kill it, be done with the Regieleki, and then maybe something can take advantage of that. Overall, maybe like screens is also nice for something like set of Goldango, but overall, you know, I don't think I'd pick this mon in really any capacity. I think
If you can tear it, it's obviously a different story. But this is Terra Band, obviously, guys. That's why we're mentioning and why it's 9 points. And I actually think that's a bit of an overpay. I would put that. I would put it, especially with Hisui and Electrode, like you said, in 5. I would move Electrode up like a point or two, and I would move this down to at least the same price point of it. It is a rapid spinner, which is in high demand this gen. But you have to keep in mind, guys, that rapid spin doesn't matter if you lose to the rockers, because the rocker comes in on the rapid spin and sets up rock again. No much of an explosion, you see, but if you're...
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I mean, that can definitely do something, but the issue is if your value and way of chipping down your hard walls and checks is literally killing yourself, it usually doesn't end up going well. I'm the biggest Aleki hater in the world. I always put through Pokemon through the OGO bind test, where I will shit on them on endlessly, but I will always try it. I always try it on Draft League, and I'll give it its fair chance. The season I won BBL Wi-Fi last gen, I had Regieleki. I won the league, so I didn't play bad. I hated it. It was so bad. It was my least favorite Pokemon in that team. Round 10 recap slides. Any big standouts to you? I think the obvious one is going to be the Dragonite. I really like Dragonite. Someone did mention that alongside Hippo is a bit tough, but Hippo isn't a Pokemon that needs to run Sandstream. Very often you don't need to run it. You can just run Sand Force and things like that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then I think Mence is nice, just kind of going up, picking the big stuff. I think that's pretty cool.
Big
In terms of like a low tier, I like Belly Bolt. Very bulky. It can do its job pretty well. Sometimes it gets shit out, but in draft, you know, you just don't have to bring it those weeks.
Exactly. All right, going into our final round of the draft, we have Tiro starting it off this time with Basculin. Do you want to talk about Big Basculin? Both forms.
Big Basculin. Both forms. So it's not the white stripe version. But that being said, you know, still very good offensively. Having a physical water type alongside a special water type, I think is very interesting. And if you just have adaptability and Wave Crash, just slap a band on it and you can break something for a bundle to clean up later. So you really are taking a little bit of pressure off a bundle. And for 4 points, you know, it's really nice, getting priority as well. It is just a water Pokemon in every sense of the word. And frankly, I think at 4 points, it's kind of all you need.
Very, very much so. Next up, we have Palisand here for Q. I like this. He needed a ground type. It also gives him a spin blocker, which I know I just mentioned last round that he didn't have one, but I forgot he drafted Palisand in the last round, so I think this is actually a really good pickup for him. He has a ton of hazard pressure on his team, and he has great removal, but he also has great ways of getting up hazards for his opponents, and being able to keep up spikes and T-spikes and webs and things like that for your Enamorus, for your Baxcalibur, for your Quaquaval, for your Torn, is going to be very, very, very valuable in keeping things low to where any of those things can clean and sweep at any given moment. So I really like this pickup. Very good physically defensive mon. He also doesn't have a conventional ground resist in it being Spidops, but Palisand checks 90% of grounds, actually, very, very well with his natural physically defensive bulk. So I actually really like that aspect of Palisand as well. Reliable recovery and shore up. Oh yeah.
He probably could have used his points a little bit better.
Yes, there was I think the mouse hole is the big one for me. Personally.
Well, I was also going to say.
Oh, and his 99 points.
99, yeah. I mean, he could have distributed that.
I didn't even notice. I was like, yeah, mouse hole is kind of shit. That's fair. But like, hey man, he really needed it. There was no ground types left. Sometimes you got to make the sacrifice and pick it up. Next up, we have Muck here for dashing. He's actually ending with some leftover points, so he can always upgrade some things a little bit later on. Actually, speaking of actual point management and things like that, but this does give him a grounded poison, which he didn't have up to this point, and his team didn't appreciate T-Spikes at all, actually. Things like Mudstill, Iron Hands, and the Decidueye and the Dunsparce and the Douchbun, those all don't appreciate T-Spikes, and your Iron Moth is going to be terraing a lot, and it's probably not going to be Terra Poisoning in most matchups. So I like that aspect of it. This mon's good with an AV. It can set up T-Spikes of its own, some more hazards. Just a solid low tier mon. 2 points, you can't go wrong with Muck. It's, you know, pretty solid valuable when it's when all things are considered. Next up we have regular Samurott. Do you want to talk about regular Samurott?
This is not a Pokemon. It is just a deficit of 3 points. But considering you do not have water on the draft, you know, I guess Samurott does exist. It is there. I would not bring it either way. I would just Terra Water the Garchomp, to be honest. But it's there. It's cool. Just you maybe like hit a Hydro Pump or like SD or something like that.
Oh, am I missing your pick? J. Ricky, what did you get? Oh shit.
J. Ricky got the big man.
Oh, you got Glimmet. Yeah, I'm just gonna pretend I did that on purpose because it sucks.
That's a Ninetales UU champ. What do you mean?
Oh, true. I forgot the rise to the top with Glimmet. Next up, we have Pikachu, a true 1 point champion. Big Pikachu right here. I mean, again, 1 point. At this point, you're kind of getting to the point where people are like, this mod's funny, maybe I'll bring it to a game. And this is a typing he doesn't have currently on his team. There might be a matchup, but I've seen matches where Pikachu just pulls up and puts the hammer down. I remember one of my favorite draft games ever was Kurt versus Liv in NCP last gen, where Kurt demolished Stall with Focus Punch Pikachu. And it was so sick. So, I mean, it's a Pokemon with value, you know? It is not terrible. It's not going to come to maybe more than one game total, and it might never come, but for a 1 point Pokemon, you're going to get some good offensive value out of it. It did lose E-Speed, which is kind of lame, but has good coverage as an electric that can hit grounds and can be really scary offensively if you position it. And again, really slow gen. Then the last pick of the draft, we have Big Pineco. Do you have any parting words on Pineco?
I have one, and that is... Nah, I'll say more. I'll say more than just Pineco. It spins, and that's about it. It's a cool mon. I wouldn't bring it ever, but I think
this is like a mascot pick for Star 2. I think this is like his favorite Pokemon ever, so I think that might be a big aspect of him grabbing the Pinecone.
Yeah, I think clicking like spikes or something like that is probably less reliable than just like switching Hatterene in on an opposing Stealth Rocker, which is a little sad, but it's a cute mon.
I wonder if they had to add this. I wonder if they had to add this to the doc so that he could pick it. That's my bane as an admin. You know how many times I've been in a draft with Amel where we have to add something to the doc because he decides it's worth drafting? Oh my god.
There was one that got added, and it's not Pineco. Pineco was actually at one to begin with. It was another little bug.
Was it? Which little bug? Was it Tarantula? Oh, the goat. The goat. He wanted to bring it week 1. I don't have good removal, so that would have been something he could have brought. But let's go ahead. We can take a look at the last round recap. There's Glimmet, so there's your Glimmet side. Oh, and I missed Tarantula. I missed 2 picks in the last round. It's okay, it was the last round guy. Look at the nice little Ash Hat Pikachu. I'm going to say that was a standout because I like him. There's not much commentary that we can give. Palisand is obviously the objective best pick. It was a good pick for Q's draft despite being 99 points. We did not have to add it. Pinecone is the GOAT. Yeah, my bad. WPF is just on something else. But yeah, that is the entire draft. We have gotten through all of it. 3 hours and 15 minutes. I hope you guys enjoyed. Do you have any parting words, Marcus, before we head out?
I'm really excited for this season. There's a lot of tough competition, so stay tuned, guys. WPF uploads are going to be every single Friday. Check them out on everybody's channel. And with that being said, I'm signing off. Take it easy, guys.
For sure. See you guys. Go check out everybody's draft stream, draft analysis. Mine's up right now, so go watch mine first watch mine first, and then go watch everybody else's. Everybody's linked in the description for both of those. But yeah, had fun this morning, guys. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next Friday.